Hello and welcome to our first monthly special. It's Jay and Andy again, and this is the Rating Room podcast.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more freestyle. We're going to be talking about things that we wouldn't normally talk about on the main Rating Room podcast, and listen out for some TV and music conversation as well. This is our very first episode of the Rating Room Extra. This is sequels and serial killers. Right, Jay, I'm going to start us off with something a little bit different than what we would normally do. So I'm going to read you something from our Instagram page. And it says, a new podcast by Jay and Andy. We review movies, TV shows, and music. We've done plenty of movie talk, haven't we? But not so much on the TV shows and music side of things. So why don't we talk music to start with? And let's give the listeners what I like to call the sounds of the Rating Room.
We don't usually talk about music, but we, as you said, we do have it on our social media accounts. So Andy, as I've got older, I've started listening to a lot of different music. So you might recall, I think when we used to work together, I used to listen to a lot of gangster rap, hip hop music when I was younger. And you obviously, I don't know if you recall, Andy, but you actually got me into 30 Seconds of Mars. So you know when you used to give me a lift to work, and I remember you lending me 30 Seconds to Mars.
Oh, those were the days, weren't they?
They were.
On these little things called CDs.
CDs, yeah. I've got that on vinyl now as well, actually. 30 Seconds to Mars. So I've been listening to loads of different music, and I've been... The main type of music I like listening to is synthwave. And it's kind of modern music that's kind of 80s influenced, really. Now, lately I've been branching out though, Andy, so I've been listening to lots of music, and I suppose you could kind of say it's not rock music, it's more alternative rock music, but also quite folk music as well, and some chilled music. So I do listen to Spotify, but I do buy a lot of vinyl records. So I did, during the beginning of the pandemic, I gave all my CDs away. I had hundreds of CDs. I gave them all away to my local hospice. But then I started collecting vinyl records. So recently I've got a new turntable and some nice speakers. And I think I probably, I don't know, actually. I'm going to talk about what we bought, soon. But the music I'm listening to at the moment is Blanco White, Riley Pierce, Bears Den, Ben Howard, Banks, The National, King Charles, Dermot Kennedy, who I thought I kind of found, that bloke's really good, and he's got absolutely millions of listeners and followers. So I'm late to the game there. Adna, PT, and the Vancouver Sleep Clinic, which is a strange name for an artist, but it's pretty cool music. But yeah, my music taste is very varied. What about you, Andy? What do you listen to? Do you still listen to 30 Seconds of Mars?
I've not listened to them for a while, but they're still on my Spotify playlist. I'm just going through those list of names that you gave out, and I'm sure they're all very cool and young and trendy. And you're much older than I am as well, so I'm really letting the side down here. The only name I know on that list is Dermot Kennedy. And I only know that because I'm pretty sure he was on Nevermind the Buzzcocks recently, which Sky have recently brought back, and it's fantastic. I don't know if you've seen any of the remakes with Greg Davis as hosting, but very, very funny. And he was on an episode of that recently. My tastes generally kind of rock, metal, new metal. So my go-to bands will be bands like Linkin Park, Shinedown, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, System of a Down, those kind of things. But I do like some mainstream music as well. I like the likes of Coldplay. And The Weeknd is someone I've got into quite recently, so I'm probably a bit late to the party for him as well. But he's had a few banger albums out in recent years.
So The Weeknd, Andy, his, because I don't listen to him, but one of his recent records is heavily influenced by synthwave.
It is, yeah, definitely.
The bands that you've mentioned, the only one I don't know of is Shinedown. I've heard of all the others, and I like some of the songs. Are Linkin Park still making stuff?
They're not since Chester's passing.
Yeah. Did they just disband, or did they kind of do their own projects? Or
I've heard a lot from Mike Shinoda, So he's done, I think during the pandemic, he did 3 solo albums. I think there was one song with lyrics and all the rest were instrumentals. But not long after Chester died, he released his first solo album called Post Traumatic, which honestly may be one of the best albums I've ever listened to. It starts very, very somber, obviously singing about death of Chester and the negative feelings that brings up. And I think the first song ends with clips of voice recordings where people have phoned him just to check in on him, sort of thing, after the news. So it's really quite dark to start with. But then as the album progresses, it becomes progressively more upbeat. It's a really, really cool album. A lot of rap influence. There's some guest artists on there like Machine Gun Kelly, and one or two others that escape me now. But it's probably the sort of thing you might like, actually, because I know you were sort of into them back in the day, weren't you, in Linkin Park? Maybe.
Yeah.
I would recommend, if you've not listened to it, Post Traumatic. Mike Shinoda, very, very good album.
Yeah, I used to have a few of their CDs. Are Limp Bizkit still going?
They released an album quite recently called Still Sucks. I thought it was pretty good, yeah. But there's been a long time waiting. I think it's been about 10 years in between albums. They were apparently making a record called Stampede of the Disco Elephant, and they would release a song and then you wouldn't hear from them, and then it just delayed, and then I think they've just abandoned it altogether and started again with the latest album, which is pretty good. But I like old school Limp Bizkit. I like the Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavoured Water album. I like Results May Vary. That's probably not one of the more popular ones, but I like that as well. That's my era, the early 2000s.
So do you, obviously you've mentioned some of the newer records and albums. Is that what you think you tend to listen to, the stuff that you, when you were younger, that came out, or do you have kind of a mix of the older stuff and the newer stuff?
It tends to be newer stuff from bands of old. Like there's not that many new bands or new artists that I've quote unquote discovered recently. I stick to what I know. What about yourself?
The thing is, because I used to listen to hip hop when I was younger, it's just there's so many swear words in there. I can't listen to it because of the kids. So I do have my guilty pleasure of sometimes listening to my Spotify playlist of hip hop. But I do listen to, like I said, synthwave a lot, and I do like finding. So obviously you've got Spotify, you've mentioned, and when you do you build your playlist, or do you listen to like albums? Or
I've got a few playlists that I've built. I've got one which is for when my wife's in the car with me, so I have to fill that with songs that she likes. So that tends to be kind of pop music that I can stomach. So it's not necessarily the songs that I would like.
That's very nice of you. I just put my own music on when we're sharing the car. So So when you build your playlist, at the bottom it says like recommendations.
Yeah.
And that's where I find a lot of new music. So I build up like my playlist of whoever, and then I go down to recommendations, and that is how I mentioned these bands I tend to find. But also one of the good things about Spotify is they build playlists for you, or they do kind of these genres. So like I like listening to, it's called Dark and Stormy, and that's where I find a lot of these bands as well, and it is good. I do like doing Spotify. It's just funny because my son, he has a varied taste in music, but he does like hip hop. But the people, when I listen to hip hop, it's the ones from when I was younger. I don't listen to modern hip hop, and he listens to like modern hip hop. So Andy, you mentioned that Spotify playlists, and I have as well. Do you buy any albums?
I don't know. Not anymore. I rely on Spotify. I do listen to albums as well as playlists. Probably more albums than playlists usually. But a few that I would buy if they were out recently. So Blink-182 have got a new album called One More Time. Really, really good. One of my favourite bands. I saw them live back in 2004, just before they split up for the first time, and they were excellent live. So they're back on form with this one. Some, what I would say, classic sounding songs like Terrified, which I believe actually was originally slated for the Boxcar Racer album of 2002, and they didn't record it, or they didn't release it, and then they brought it back 20 years later. Little jingles that they do, I suppose, for lack of a better term. One called Face, which is quite funny. Some really catchy tunes like Dance With Me and Blink Wave, which kind of made me think, I don't know if that's their attempt on synthwave, but it's quite an 80s sounding song, but it's very, very catchy. But probably my favourite song, and it's a bit of a tearjerker actually, is the ballad called One More Time, which kind of talks about them reuniting, and there's mention of the plane crash that Travis was in many years ago that nearly killed him, and Mark had cancer quite recently as well, so they're mentioned in the song. And the videos, the video that goes with it kind of harps back to the old days as well. So that's a really, really good song. Another album I've listened to recently was Ubiquitous by Puddle of Mud. Big fan of the band, didn't really like this album. Probably need to listen to it a few more times, but it wasn't their best effort on first listen. And then the random one from a band that's not very well known. You know, when I first listened to them, they only had like 50 or 60 monthly listeners, and I think they've only got a few hundred now. It's a band called The Builders, and the album is called Boxcar and a Jug of Wine. Now, it's from 2018, but I only heard about it recently. So we'll talk about some podcast stuff later, but one of the podcasts I listened to is Click This, the Kevin Nash podcast, which is technically a wrestling podcast because he's a WWE Hall of Famer, but they talk about other stuff as well. And the song that ends the podcast is called Sophia, and it's by Kevin's son, Tristan, who's part of The Builders, and sadly he passed away last year. And they still talk about him on the podcast because he was quite pivotal to the success of it. And they mentioned the song Sophia, and they played it in full at the end of one episode. And I thought, oh, that's really good, I'll check it out. So I checked out this album, and it's a really, really good album. Songs like Lovely View, Island Dream were the highlights for me, but very, very good album from a lesser known band. So I've listened to that a few times recently as well. What about you? You mentioned you've been buying some vinyls recently. What's on your purchase list?
A lot, Andy. So I think over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I've purchased around 40 vinyl records. Now, I think I've got a problem actually, Andy, in terms of buying vinyl records, because I've had to buy a new. So I was originally storing it in like a bookcase, but I ran out of space, so now I little carry cases that you see DJs carry, like little silver ones with wheels. Yeah, I've had to buy 6 of those to like put my records in, and I've still not transitioned some of those over from my bookcase to those little carry cases. And it's even got to the point where I've got some imported from America, so all the way from San Francisco, and also Europe as well. And the one that came from Finland, the artist actually signed it for me as well. Nice little note in there on a little post-it note. I'm just going to list a few different ones. So Gunship's latest album, Unicorn, which I know you've heard of Gunship. I remember talking to you about Gunship when we were in a pub once. So I got the limited edition, and that is a numbered one, signed, and it's a picture disc one. It's really cool actually. And I'm going to put a little video of that on our TikTok and YouTube channel, so make sure you check that out. Yeah. Now, the National...
I jump in at this point because I just opened my Spotify playlist, and it brings you up what you listened to most recently at the top, doesn't it? As a general rule.
Yours?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see that, but if you look bottom left of those 8 is the album Unicorn by Gunship. Because I've listened to that quite recently. It's pretty good, I must say. I think it starts really well. Monster in Paradise is a banger of an opener. And one of the featured artists, Milky Way, is part of a band called Wargasm. And that's a band I've been getting into quite recently because they did a record with Fred Durst. So they're kind of a little bit new metal. It's very, not a band I'd heard of, but very, very good. So yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that as one of your purchases.
Gunship is probably in my top 5 bands that I listen to, and I will do this in a social media YouTube video a bit more in depth, but their latest album I've listened to it a lot, Andy, and I can't quite place how it compares with the other 2, but I think I'm going to do a separate video on that. But that's really interesting that you've been listening to that. But I've been listening to a lot of The National, so I don't know if you said you've heard of The National before. They've been going for quite a few years. So I remember listening to About Today, the song that they did and that featured in a film, and that's the first song that I heard that got me into them. And over the last 6 or 8 weeks, I've actually managed to pick up some of their albums, and I've pre-ordered one as well, actually, called Laugh Track, and it comes in pink vinyl, and it's released later in November. So looking forward to that to come in. And the one that I got from San Francisco is 2D Cat, Weeks Where Decades Happen, and Fantastic Voyage. So I got two, and they were imported from San Francisco. The thing that grates for me is getting records from America. The actual records are reasonably priced. It's the postage that is more than the actual records, and that's the only thing that grates me about that. But Andy, just going back to Blink 182, I remember, when I mentioned that you shared lent me the CD for 30 Seconds to Mars, and I remember you lending me something about one of the albums, Blink 182, but I also remember you listening to me, lending to me, was it like a spin-off or something, Angels and Airwaves as well? I remember you lending me some of those.
Angels and Airwaves, which was Tom's band. So when they broke up in 04 or early 05, I guess it would have been, Tom formed the band Angels and Airwaves, and they've had 5 or 6 albums out now. I think one even like last year, I think it was, called Life Forms, which was very, very good. Travis and Mark formed Plus 44. They released an album, pretty good album, but then never to be heard of again, sort of thing. They got back together for a bit. They released an album and an EP, and then they split again, and they brought in so Tom left to do more Angels and Airwaves stuff and hunt for UFOs and aliens, because he believes in that kind of shit. But they brought in Matt Skiba, I don't know how you pronounce his name. They released a couple of albums as Blink 182, and probably my favourite Blink album is the album 9, which was when Tom was on hiatus. So when he came back, I was kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm excited about this, but they redeemed themselves. A good album. But yeah, my favourite one is 9. But yeah, Angels and Airwaves, a few good albums out there. I quite like some of the more recent stuff he's done.
So Andy, you're assuming I know who this Tom is. So what instrument does he play, or is he a singer?
He's singer and guitar. So there's the three of them. There's the drummer, and then there's the two lead singers. They kind of alternate. He's the one with the nasally voice. So the song "I Miss You," which is one of the more famous ones. He's the one who sings. I'm going to butcher it, but he doesn't say the voice inside my head. He says the voice inside my head, like that, but better. So he's got the weird voice. We'll edit that out. That was disgraceful.
No, I thought, is he English then?
No, they're all like
a Cockney.
No, it was a really bad impression. It's a really bad impression. That's all it was. No, they're all American. I can't sing and I can't do impressions.
No. And the bloke that you mentioned, Travis, is he the drummer?
He's the drummer. He's
he's probably most famous, isn't he?
He does a lot of. I mean, he produced the latest album, but he did some of his own stuff. He's quite into like the rap and hip hop scene, so he's done some hip hop stuff. And he's got a band called the Transplants. That again, is kind of very hip hop stuff. So that's again probably more your side of type of music than mine. But I quite enjoy the Transplants as an alternative. But he's the one that was injured in the plane crash where a couple of people died. I think is it DJ AM, whatever it is, or Adam Goldstein, that the producers that died in the plane crash, and he was part of that. And he's currently either married to or dating one of the Kardashians, which I'll reserve judgment on that. It's not my place.
Yes, let's swiftly
move on,
shall we?
So that's a little bit about our musical tastes, but let's stick with other forms of entertainment. So obviously the Rating Room podcast is the #1 podcast worldwide, as stated by myself just now. You can't deny that. But, we have to listen to some others that are vying for silver medal. What are some of the ones that you listen to when we're not voting our time to the Rating Room?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, Annie, so I don't know what you do, because you have quite a long commute like myself. So my commute is an hour, and I listen to a podcast for about 50 minutes, and in the last 10 minutes I move over to one of my playlists. And I do like listening to audio dramas as well, so I do tend to flick between shows. So I know you listen to podcasts, but what I do is I binge listen to them. So I'll binge listen to a certain show, get up to date, and then I might not listen to it for months and months again, and then do the same again. So I do like doing that. So the ones that I just want to kind of mention is one that was actually released in 2017, and it was concluded in early 22, but I only found it a few weeks ago, and it's called The Phenomenon, and it's an audio drama / podcast, and I found it quite interesting. So the podcast, it tells a story of different survivors, and there's a supernatural event, and it's wiped out 90%, over 90% of the population. Now, I did enjoy the podcast, and you do follow the stories from different characters and different viewpoints across the world. So I think that's quite interesting, and I like it because lots of people die. So you can't get too attached to the main characters because, you know, they don't all get through to the end. The only criticism is some of the acting and dialogue is a bit wooden. So that's a bit grating for some of the characters. I don't want to name the characters, but then there were some that I just thought, I just can't stand that character or that actor doing that character's voice or their performance. But it is really well produced, and, you know, lots of good sound effects, and it's really interesting how the story develops. However, one of the biggest criticisms is the ending. So the first 3 seasons, you kind of follow the main story, you know, like the 90% of being wiped out across the world, the population. And then it just quickly ends. And then the 4th season focuses on kind of in the same universe, little collections of stories, you know, happening around and after the main story is concluded. But it's just, the ending is just so rushed. And at the beginning of each episode, it says it's based on a book. So I Googled it and I read the book, and everyone's saying the same kind of thing about the book. It just seems to end. So the podcast has stayed true to the actual book in terms of the rush ending, but it's just so disappointing. I don't want to, just in case you ever listen to it, or if any listeners want to listen to it, I won't say what happens at the end. But the 3 seasons, you're building up. You don't know why it's well, you know what's caused the 90% to die, but you don't know why. You don't know it's aliens or what. And then you get to the end, and it's just like pretty much all wrapped up in one episode. And the episodes are probably about half an hour long, and it's just really rushed. What about you, Andy? Do you have any comments on that? Is that something that has my review enticed you? Do you listen to audio dramas?
I don't really, and I think same with like audio. Is it like being read from a book, or is it more that it's acted out?
It's acted out.
Okay,
yeah.
so that might not be too bad, but I don't like being read to. So I think that's why I've kind of stayed away from audiobooks. And if my wife's listening, she'll be able to attest to this, because there's times where she'll want to read something to me, and I need to see it. I need to see the words, because otherwise it doesn't go in. So, which is strange, I guess, because, you know, I'm a big fan of listening to podcasts, but that's being spoken to, not being read to, and I guess there's that distinction. So no, I could check out something like that, because I've never really done it before, so that is intriguing. But no, podcasts are my thing. You mentioned earlier I do have a long commute, so tend to fill it up with podcasts for the most part. And I'm a big pro wrestling fan, as I've mentioned on the podcast before, so it tends to be exclusively wrestling podcasts. There's a whole bunch of them that I listen to, some more than others. Sometimes it depends on the topics. You know, if they tend to be, if they're about a specific topic, I'll decide whether I want to listen to it or not, and so I can skip some. Conrad Thompson, who has seemingly about 450 different wrestling podcasts, he features quite heavily on my Spotify, because I listen to quite a few of his. The main one being Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, is kind of his original. That was really, really good. I like the stuff with Jim Ross. Good. It's, you know, old time wrestlers or wrestling personalities telling stories of the past is where I like it. But my favourite has to be Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette's Drive Through and the Jim Cornette Experience, which he does both of those each week, so 2 episodes a week. They tend to run 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes. but it's a mix of reviews of modern stuff, which he doesn't always like, so he's got quite an entertaining viewpoint of all things modern pro wrestling, but then also talking about his experiences of the past and just general history, because they're quite heavy into the wrestling history, so it's educational as well as entertaining, but just it has me in stitches every time they come out. They're so funny, so entertaining, and it's the first, as soon as the episode's out, I have to listen to it, even if I'm halfway through something else. It's just they're head and shoulders above anything else in the wrestling podcast space. So that's kind of my go-to.
So Jim Cornette, I know you've mentioned him before, and his name does ring a bell. Was he an ex-wrestler then?
He was a manager. So he was a manager kind of through the early 80s he started out, and then ever since. So I don't know if because you used to watch back in the day, you weren't an avid fan like I am, but you may, if you remember wrestlers from the mid-90s like Yokozuna, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, he was the manager of those guys in the mid-90s when they were part of Camp Cornette. He would always carry a tennis racket with him, always wear kind of bright, loud, colourful suits, but as well as that, he was probably he's most famous for managing the Midnight Express in the 80s, which was kind of a little bit before my era, but has he spoken about over the years. I've gone back and looked them up, and they were a fantastic team, and he's one of the best managers of all time, if not the best manager of all time. But he's an encyclopedia of knowledge, and he's so passionate about wrestling, it's infectious. He's quite a controversial figure to some, because some people are soft and don't like to be criticised, in my opinion, but they tend to think that's controversial. I think he just tells it like it is, and if people don't like it, that's just too bad.
So does he only do WWE, or does he talk about
other franchises? He talks about AEW quite a lot, because they, arguably are the number 2 wrestling company in the world, but they are number 2 in many ways, according to some of his reviews. He will say what he's a fan of, and he will say what he's not a fan of, and some people don't like that. But also he's got the knowledge, he's got the experience, so it's not like he's just looking at it from an average fan's perspective. He knows what he's talking about, and some people like that, and some people, particularly within the wrestling business, just can't handle the truth, I guess.
Nice. Your passion comes through, Andy, and obviously you've also featured on another podcast that deals with wrestling as well.
I did a few months ago. I was on Wrestling with Brittany. Brittany, of course, appeared on The Rating Room to talk about the link between James Bond and wrestling, which was a very entertaining and insightful episode. I really enjoyed that. So it was good to return the favour and appear on the Status Alternative podcast. What did I say? Wrestling with Brittany. That was our episode, wasn't it? Sorry, I f***ed up. I appeared on the Status Alternative podcast with Brittany, who appeared on our Wrestling with Brittany episode of The Rating Room. So you know what I'm saying. It's it's getting late, but hopefully you got the gist. But it was a very enjoyable experience talking to Brittany about wrestling, and who knows? Maybe we'll get to do it again in the future.
Yeah, indeed. And you've obviously mentioned, Andy, you listen to lots of different wrestling ones, and I listen to lots of different podcasts as well. And I do like listening to the shows that Q Code produce. So some of the ones I've listened to recently is Ad Liaisum, How to Win Friends and Disappear People, Last Known Position, and From Now. And From Now is one I wonder whether it's actually going to get made into a TV show. So it featured Richard Madden, so Game of Thrones and Bodyguard, and we obviously talked about him when we talked about who could be the next James Bond in our special episode, and also Brian Cox in Succession and The Bourne Identity. And it's really interesting premise, and you could tell, you've got these A-listers here, Andy, and you can tell it's really well produced. And the story, I don't want to give too much away just in case you listen to it or watch it if it does get made into a TV show. It tells the story of a lost spaceship, and it returns to Earth after vanishing 35 years earlier. However, the twist is that there's one lone survivor on this spaceship, and he's not aged a day. That's the twist.
That sounds intriguing. That's like the Manifest meets Back to the Future.
I've not watched Manifest, but I've watched Back to the Future.
Manifest is the series where a plane disappears and then it lands 5 years later. But the people on the plane just think they've been through a bit of a storm and they don't realise any time's elapsed. And so they land on the runway thinking they're just getting off their flight as normal. And there's all kinds of police and fire engines and stuff like that. It's like, where's this plane been for the last 5 years? And they've not aged at all, but everyone else has. So that's the premise of that.
That is very similar, and because so from his point of view, something's happened wrong when they've gone from the launch. Something happens, and then it seems like he's just coming back. So for him, it's near instant that he goes up and comes back down, but it's 35 years. So does the Manifest have a conclusion, or did it get cancelled?
I think it was cancelled and then revived by Netflix. So I've not seen the end of it. I think I've seen 3 seasons, and there's either 4 or 5.
Do you know what the twist is? Do you find out what happened at that point when you stopped watching it?
I can't remember. It was getting a bit... It probably didn't need 3 seasons. There's a reason they cancelled it, I think. It was good, like first season or 2, but then it started going a little bit downhill for me.
Yeah, my wife watched it, but I don't know how long she lasts, because there's so many TV programs that sometimes they can be quite similar, and that one does ring a bell. But then I was just thinking about one that she watched called Flash Forward, which is
yes, that was the one that came to mind as well. I've got the book as well.
Right, nice. Is it a true story?
I would hope not. So Flash Forward only ran for 1 season.
Okay.
Which is a real shame, actually, because I really enjoy the premise of it and I love the way they filmed it. Did you see any of it, or do you know what it's about?
I remember watching the pilot, and I watched a few episodes and I dropped out, and then the wife watched it must have been the first season then. So I remember, I don't know exactly like the time period, but I remember them having a flash forward and then they're back in the present day, but I can't remember like if it was years or what it was.
If memory serves, they blacked out. Everyone on the Earth blacked out for a couple of minutes, and in that couple of minutes, they saw what happened. I think it was like 6 months later or something. It wasn't like massively into the future, but obviously blacking out, and there was planes falling from the sky, crashes, etc., etc. So it caused a whole bunch of chaos and destruction that they had to deal with. But then also people were questioning what's going on with all these visions that people are having, and what do they mean, because they didn't know. And then they started to figure out, this is some point in the future, and they managed to pinpoint the day, etc., etc. But then some people didn't have visions, so then it's like, well, they must be dead then. They must die sometime in the next 6 months. And then so you got that thread of what's going on, sort of thing. And then the series ended, if memory serves, with they were getting closer and closer and closer to this, whatever they called it, the flash forward day. They gave it a name, I can't remember what it was. And it was kind of like, there's going to be another blackout. And it kind of ended, then you never saw it. And it felt like it could have continued on if they'd have, carried on. So based on that, I went out and bought the book. And the book is largely the same as the series. Probably some nuances in terms of characters and etc. But it was basically the same story. And I'm going to spoil it for anyone out there. So if you want to read the book, stop listening for the next 30 seconds or so. There was another flash forward in the book, but instead it was like millions and millions and millions of years into the future. And I was like, what the hell is this? This is ridiculous.
Sounds like The Time Machine. Have you seen that Time Machine?
I've not, no.
He goes so far in the future that they kind of it's not aliens, but it's just ridiculous. It's the bloke Guy Pearce, wasn't it? And I've read the book. H.G. Wells, I think, wrote it, the old classic. I remember reading the book as well. But yeah, that just sounds very silly, Andy.
We're going to talk some TV shows in a minute, but I want to pause proceedings and I want to just do something a little bit random and a little bit silly. Just for our own entertainment, if not the listeners. So we'll see how this goes. But I want to introduce a segment that I'm calling stolen question. Now, what I've done here is I've stolen a couple of questions from the internet, and we're going to answer them. But we can do one or the other, or we can do both. But I'm going to give you a choice, Jay, and I've not prepared you for this in advance, so this could be an absolute disaster, and there'll be a lot of editing to do, or this could be quite amusing.
This, Andy, this feels like when you sprung the quiz on me at James Bond.
It is, yeah.
We when we do some of these episodes, we kind of write down some bullet points, and this just says stolen question. So there's no narrative, nothing here to prep myself and Andy. So I'm a bit nervous about this. So this is it general knowledge?
No, there's no knowledge required here.
Right, that's good.
But you have a choice of two. So do you want an agony aunt question, or do you want a job interview question?
Oh, I'm leaning towards agony aunt.
Okay, and I don't have the answers, so I don't know how these were answered because I just stole the question, didn't steal the answers. So the agony aunt. So this was taken from a few years ago. It was on the Daily Mail website, which I didn't go on the Daily Mail website purposefully. I'm not a reader. I'm not a fan at all. But I've got to give them credit because this is where it was from. This is an agony aunt question. So I want you to answer this as if you are Agony Aunt J, and you're going to help this person out. Okay, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Last night, I was naked and playing poker with my wife. A poker chip accidentally fell into her vagina. Are there any chances of pregnancy?
Oh, imagine. What colour are poker chips? I'm just thinking of the race, if there was a chance of pregnancy, Andy.
Well, you get red and blue and green.
Yeah,
you get red and blue and green Teletubbies as well, though, don't you?
I wonder what was on the poker chips then.
I feel like we're missing some context, but that is exactly what the question says. So there's no more information than that.
That is a slight worry. I've only ever played poker once, Andy, but I was fully clothed. I don't know if do you play poker?
I've played poker a total of 3 times in my life, and it was £5 per game that I paid in, and I won £30 on the third game, and then I've never played since. So I finished ahead, but I did not get pregnant.
No. Did your wife?
She wasn't there, and I wasn't married at the time. Actually, this was pre-marriage,
pre-ball and chain.
Yeah.
I used to work with a bloke, and he used to save up his salary, and he would go to Vegas and just play like poker. And he used to, he used to go someplace in Nottingham as well. But he used to do like poker competitions. But he would save up and just go to Vegas for like 2 weeks and just do like, the casinos and play poker and everything. I always ask him when he came back if he was up, and he can tell with his expression that he wasn't up, but I'm guessing it's just the experience.
He came back to work. That's probably the giveaway, isn't it?
So do you see, did you say this was online, or was this an actual printed article?
This was online. So I just Googled agony aunt questions because I thought
you can't see other people's responses. I just wonder what other advice.
I can probably find it, but let me see if I can find it, because it was one of the top searches. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this question? How would you go about answering?
If I was this person's wife/girlfriend, I'd be seriously considering the relationship if he is worried about that. I think it's a he. I don't recall if he.
It's a he. Oh, I've got the answer that the actual agony aunt gave. But let's. Do you want to give your answer first? How would you answer this question first, and then I'll give you what was said.
Well,
it will be an anticlimax when I give the actual answer.
I think. Well, mine would just be quite factual, Andy. So mine would be, don't be silly, young man. You cannot get pregnant from poker chips, even if it's smeared in you know what. I'm being careful what I say because my daughter, who's 11, is in the next room. But yes, that would be my advice. And he needs to educate himself if that's what he's worried about.
It's a very sensible answer. And I must just call out, I said it was from Daily Mail, but actually when I look at the Daily Mail site, it does say credit Hindustan Times. So they've stolen it themselves. But the answer, it's quite an anticlimax. It's not entertaining. Obviously, you are a novice player. Stick to the table and ensure you do not swallow the chip either way, vagina or the gullet. A pregnancy will not occur. Chips do not contain sperms. There you go. Do you want the job interview question just because I took the trouble of writing it down?
Go for it.
And again, I've not taken the answer from this, but this is apparently from livecareer.com, and this is a genuine question that's asked in job interviews. And I must admit, I've never been asked this myself. What would you do if you found a penguin in the freezer?
Now, I like detail, Andy. So I'm making the assumption it's a chocolate penguin. So in England, you have these little biscuit bars, penguins, which I don't know, the international. I don't know. But that would be my assumption, Andy. So that's how I'm going to play it. I'm not going to think about real penguins. But I remember being asked a question, Andy, in one of my interviews that I did. And it was something random like, how would you go about finding out how many glasses there are in the world? As in drinking glasses. That was the question that I had.
Oh, I hate questions like that. It's like there's no relevance to the job, to real life.
No. But that penguin one, that's random, but also funny because I only saw it in social media in the last 2 weeks, very similar, where someone said, I'm going to give you an elephant and you can't kill it or sell it, what you're going to do with it. So that's a similar type of kind of random question.
I'd phone a zoo and say, do you fancy taking this elephant off my hands?
Yes. The penguin one, it could be the same kind of answer. I'll see if it could dance.
I've just Googled the question to see if anyone has answered it, and someone has answered it online saying, I would make sure to call the animal control line, as I admit I have zero knowledge of penguins, except that they are always in their Sunday best. Hopefully the penguin is able to survive. I might give it some fish just in case it's hungry. Not without paying for it first, of course.
I just think, when I think of penguins, I just think of Happy Feet.
Yeah. Or Madagascar. The penguins of Madagascar. Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
I don't like Madagascar films, I don't. No, they're not mine. But yeah, because there's a few of those ones, isn't there? I think the penguins even got their own TV show, didn't they?
They got their own... Yeah, they did. I think they did. Yeah. Or a spin-off film, at least.
Yeah. Maybe it's a spin-off film, yeah.
But there you go, Jay. That's just a little bit of silliness to break up the seriousness that is the rating room. Shall we get back onto topic somewhat? Let's talk a little bit about TV, shall we? We've not touched TV yet. Just some of the shows that we like to watch. So I like to watch crime dramas in my house. Me and my wife love a crime drama, but we like the easy watching shows. The ones that don't really require a lot of thinking. So, for example, at the moment, we're watching the 3 FBI shows. So there's FBI, FBI Most Wanted, FBI International, all basically the same premise. It's following FBI solving cases, but they're not exactly taxing on the brain. So that's kind of the things we watch recently. What about you? What's your TV planner looking like these days?
So before I just tell you and listeners what I'm watching, so Andy, the 3 FBI shows that you just mentioned, I've never heard of that, but I think in one of the other episodes we've done, or maybe we spoke off air, I remember you saying you like watching long running TV shows, and I can't remember if you said it was NCIS or Criminal Minds or something like that. Something that's been going for years and years and years. The problem I find with those is how can you keep finding episodes that can be unique and interesting? There's only so many say crimes that department or that number of characters can solve. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I kind of like NCIS, for example. I couldn't even tell you how many seasons there have been now, but I think I probably watched the first 4 or 5, and then it's like, oh, and then my wife carried on watching it sometimes, a few more. But I struggle, and I don't know these FBI ones if it's the same. So again, Andy, you know, when I'm watching TV programs, I don't like long seasons. So I kind of had that sweet spot of 10 to 13 episodes a season. If it goes on, you know, when we were younger, say NCIS, for example, used to be like 22 to say 26 episodes every season, and it's just too long. And I like TV programs that have a story arc that kind of spans a whole season, and not each episode is like a silo. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I tend to agree that they are the better ones, and later on in this episode we're going to talk about one of the better examples of that. But you're right. NCIS is one that, although I never watched the main one, it was the spin-offs. I watched the LA and the New Orleans versions. These FBI ones, they're okay. Like I said, they're nice and easy to watch. The thing that really annoys me is how they dumb it down for the viewers. And what I mean by that is, let's think of a random example. Let's say they're solving a case and it involves the post office. They would talk to each other and explain what a post office is, like they would know that as part of the case already. Or they'd say like, what's the thing? Such and such has got a GSW. As you see someone laying there after they've clearly just been shot, and they'll go, "Oh, they've got a gunshot wound." So, yes, we know what that is. And if you're talking to each other and you're both in the FBI or you're both police officers, you know what that is. So you don't need to explain it to the other person. And it's just that kind of like, it's like, oh, just get on with it. That's the thing that really annoys me about that, and many other shows are guilty of that.
So usually in these kind of long-running TV shows, you kind of have like a main star or someone that might be in the main one, then that either a supporting character might go to like a spin-off, or, you know, then they get their own show. Is that what's the case with these three? Are they all separate, or do they have like those crossover episodes? Any of the cast move between each of the 3 different shows?
They have had crossover episodes, and one has led to another. So they have, the main FBI show is based out of New York. Then that led to the spin-off of FBI Most Wanted, and they go all over the US depending on where the crime is. So that adds a little bit of variety to it because they're going all over. And then FBI International, exactly as it sounds, it tends to be based in Europe. So they've got their head office is in Budapest, or as one of the characters keeps referring to it, Budapest. Like, that's not how you pronounce it. You're very annoying every time you say Budapest. It's Budapest. And they go all over Europe solving crimes perpetrated against Americans usually, or by Americans, which is why they need the FBI. So they link with Europol as well. And what I have to say, one of them, the more recent series, they've introduced the British character who's got the worst British accent in the world, and she keeps talking about her flat in Manchester. Like, you've just heard the word flat and the word Manchester and you've put them together, and then she'll randomly throw in, "Oh, we should go out for a pint." Like, because that's how British people talk. And in the one I watched recently, they were talking about something that happened, and she just went, "Bollocks." It's like, you would not use the word bollocks. Like, just cut that out. Yeah, very. But, you know, I'm slagging them off, but yeah, I do quite enjoy watching them. It's just
I see.
it's an easy watch while you watch having your evening meal or something, until you then watch a better program afterwards as a palate cleanser.
That's interesting, because me and my wife have something similar where we watch a TV show that's, say, 30 minutes tops while we have our lunch, and that's like what you just said, like you use your FBI ones, and then we watch something that's more intense or more interesting later on in the evening. So that's interesting, yeah. So the ones we've been watching, well, actually 2 of these, Andy, me and my wife have watched, and then one I watched. So The Glory is a South Korean revenge series, and it is really good, Andy. I do recommend this one, and I wonder if it will ever get remade by, say, like the Americans, or over here, like in the West, because it is really, really good. However, I wonder whether they can do it, because the premise is slightly different, because I didn't realize this was an actual issue in real life. So the main character, she was violently bullied at school. She suffered horrendous injuries. They burned her. They just like tortured her, basically. And she was only a school age kid. And it's really good because the series does the mix of the flashback as well, so you can see what she's going through, and then it goes to the present day, and she's plotting her revenge against the 5 bullies. And it is really, really good. I do recommend it. And I didn't realize this, so I work with a lady who comes from Malaysia, and she was saying that it wasn't based on an actual true story, but when this was released, it actually kind of shone the light on this type of thing happening in South Korean schools. And there's been interviews with people after this came out to say, that it is an issue in their schools, and it is really bad. Because at one point, the student, sorry, spoilers alert, if you don't want to listen, tune out for the next 30 seconds. The kid goes to the teacher to say she's being bullied, but this male teacher, because it kind of brings dishonor onto the school, he actually starts slapping her and beating her up himself, and he's like, she's got nowhere to go. Her parents are just useless, and you see about the parents, but it's so good because she's plotted her revenge throughout the life that she's got into the present day. I don't want to give too much away. It's just really good.
Oh, that sounds quite intriguing.
It's one of those things. So Andy, I used to watch a lot of programs that required subtitles, and I get my wife into them, but she won't read, so I have to watch them dubbed. And sometimes the voices you could see, that sounds kind of realistic. Or sometimes there's a program you might watch and the voice actor just doesn't fit that character. But it is really good, and it has a good ending, because as far as I'm aware, there's not a season 2, but there might be a season 2. They've done the ending really well, because they kind of close it off, but then they leave something open. So if they do a season 2, great. If they don't, then people would be happy with it. So that's one I would definitely recommend. I do watch the Star Wars programs, Andy. So I've watched Ahsoka on Disney Plus, and I did enjoy that. But I know you're not a big Star Wars fan, Andy, so I'm just going to jump over that one. But that is one that I did enjoy. The last one I want to talk to you about, Andy, because I can't remember if you've mentioned you've watched this or not, so I'm getting confused, is Money Heist. Now, I've had this on my watch list for ages and ages, and after we finished watching The Glory, Netflix recommends other TV shows. Now, one of them was Money Heist Korea, and I thought, so I Googled it, and the Korean version is a remake of the Spanish version. And when I read the reviews, people reckon the Spanish original version is loads better. So I said to the missus, I said, no, let's not watch the Korean one, let's watch the Spanish one. I mean, it's been on my list for years, and we've watched the first 2 seasons, but I think they call it parts. So we watched first part and second part. And it's really, really good, and I think it's really well done, because it puts like a twist on the bank heist kind of show film. So have you seen this one before?
I've not, but loads of people have spoken about how brilliant it is. Like loads of work colleagues and friends have said, you need to watch Money Heist, and never got around to it. But it's one I'm badgered on a regular basis to make sure I watch.
It is good because, again, it doesn't have many episodes, so I can't remember off the top of my head how many episodes it has. And there's 5 parts on Netflix. I don't know if they're making any more. But the first 2 seasons that we've watched are really good. I'll definitely recommend. And that's another program I think, you could see a remake by, the Americans as well. Put a Western kind of American kind of spin on it, because it's just different. It's really interesting. If you watch it, it's really interesting how they've done the bank heist. It's really enjoyable. I think they're the main. Andy, before I finish this one, this is the frustration I get. So, me and my wife have different tastes. So, I don't know if it's the same with you and your wife. If you got, like, you know, when you watch stuff on Netflix, we have two different profiles, and then like the kids have got their own profile. So do you build your watch list up, and then like your wife might have a watch list, or do you have like a joint account?
We've got a joint profile, so we tend to watch
do you?
the same things.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's sex and violence, usually on the list. more the violent side of things. The only rule is, if they hurt a dog, we can't watch it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the hurt a dog now. I don't think any dogs are hurt. No. So we have separate profiles. So my watch list is just massive, because there'll be things on there that I think, oh, the wife will watch, and then there's things on there that I think my wife won't watch. So we're trying to spend more time together. So we try to watch things together, because in the past we watched, you know, I'd be downstairs or she'd be downstairs, another person be somewhere else, and we watched stuff independently. Now, I was watching a program, and I was 1.5 episodes in. So it's called One Piece. It's a manga series that's been ongoing for years and years and years, and Netflix have put a live action version in. And I watched 1.5 episodes, and my wife walked in while I was watching that second episode, and she went, "Oh, this looks good." I went, "What? Why do you think it's good?" It's like it's based on a comic, and she hates like kind of comic films and TV programs. So I went out of the episode, put the trailer on for her so she could watch the trailer, because I thought she might have thought these few minutes that she's seen is interesting. Put the trailer on, and she said, "Oh no, that looks really good. It's like really quirky. Can we watch it together?" So I went, yeah, okay. I'll watch the first episode with you. So I paused it. That was a month ago. And guess which episode I'm on, Andy?
Are you on episode 1 or 2?
I'm on the same point, because she's not watched it yet. So I'm just like, I've moved on to other stuff now, because I'm like waiting to watch it. But yeah, it's just so, it is very quirky. And it's got, they've ordered a season 2 already. So lots of people have been watching it. It's got some good reviews.
So good to know. Manga's not really my thing, but, you know, if this is a remake of, I guess
it's a live action one though, so I don't read manga, so they've actually done like a live action version, and it's, I mean, like, I've only watched 1.5 episodes and it looked good, but when I read the reviews, because people were really hesitant about it coming out, thinking, oh, Netflix going to ruin this long running comic manga, and people seem to be on board. And it's got a season 2 already, so
yeah, that's a positive sign.
But you, just going back to my second one, Andy, you I know you don't watch Star Wars, but you've not watched any of the TV Star Wars?
I haven't.
Not The Mandalorian or anything?
No, The Mandalorian's the one that I've heard of. It just doesn't appeal to me. I do have Disney Plus. Don't watch it a great deal, to be honest. I probably need to watch a bit more. It's finding time. It's finding time, isn't it?
It is finding time. And Star Wars is one of those things that I watch it, but I've not watched all the films. So I've not watched the last 2 films that they released. So there'll be things happening in the TV shows that Star Wars fans will appreciate more than I do, or they might know something's happening because something happened in that film that I won't have been exposed to. But I do think these Star Wars films, TV shows, are really well made, and they are interesting. Do
you think it's a good way to get new fans of the franchise? Because I guess, to your point earlier around, you know, you need to have seen the film to understand the series? It almost like closes the door on anyone new. It's like, if you're not part of our world, you can't come in, sort of thing.
Yeah, and there is, you know, the things happening. So, you know, there's the character that appears in this. She appeared in The Mandalorian for at least a few episodes as well, so you have that crossover as well, which I do find quite interesting. So Andy, we've talked about podcasts, audio dramas, TV shows. Have you watched any random films lately?
I can't say that I have, to be honest, but I did catch part of Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, I think it's called.
Is that the one just on Sky now?
It's on as we're recording. So for our listeners out there, we're recording this in early November, so it's a couple of weeks ahead of when this will be coming in your ears. But that was on recently. It was a rainy day, kids are off school, so put the little man in front of it, he didn't care. And I understand why, because it was bloody awful. And I like the Shrek films, and I like the character Puss in Boots, but this was not a good film at all.
Is it voiced by Banderas?
I think so, yeah. I think he's still getting a good payday out of it, I'm sure. But, it wasn't good. It was one of those spin-offs or sequels, I guess you could say, that just really wasn't needed. More on that very soon. What about you? Have you watched any good or bad films recently?
Well, okay, Andy. You've mentioned Disney Plus. Now, I've recently purchased Paramount Plus, and it's another streaming service that we sign up for, but there is a reason, Andy. So, I do our listeners know what we're covering later? Have we mentioned that?
We haven't yet. Shall we give the game away? Because we're about an hour in, and we've mentioned this episode is called Sequels and Serial Killers. And we've not talked about sequels yet, and we've not talked about serial killers yet, but we will get to it. And the serial killer portion to end the show is going to be season 1 of Dexter. And I think that's where you were going with this, wasn't it?
Yes, I didn't want to do a spoiler. So, Andy, as you know, I purchased the box set of Dexter, so all the seasons on DVD. However, my DVD player has broken, so I couldn't watch Dexter season 1. I got to, I think, episodes 7 or 8, and we was on a tight deadline to get this episode recorded, so I ended up getting Paramount Plus. And because I'm tight, I noticed that if you pay for the whole annual subscription, it works out cheaper, so I ended up doing that. Anyway, before I started watching Dexter on Paramount Plus, I was just flicking through to see what they've got, and I noticed that they had the 1990 film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, growing up, I loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I loved the cartoons and the films, the live action films and the cartoons. And I thought, I want to watch this. And my daughter was around, so she's 11 at the time of recording this. She's 12 next week. And we watched it together, and it was really good, reminiscent. Now, I don't know if you've seen that one, but watching it through adult eyes, I don't know if my eyesight is going. Do you remember the Turtles?
I was a fan as a kid. I remember having a pair of jeans with the teenage... Well, remember the cartoon version of it?
The cartoon.
Now, listeners in the UK may remember that it wasn't actually called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because there was bad connotations with the word ninja, so they renamed it to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Oh, yes.
So I had a pair of jeans with a Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles knee patch on them.
Nice.
But yeah,
nice.
I was a fan back in the day.
So the live action film, I had to keep telling my daughter what each of the turtles were called because she kept forgetting. And I don't know if you had a favourite one. My favourite is Donatello. In the film, Raphael and Michelangelo are the red and green sash. The banner that they have.
Yeah, the eyewear thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it.
Now, it's really hard to tell the difference in the film. The red and orange. So I don't know, my eyes are going bad. But no, that was my random film. It was really good. And I got all 3 of the original live action films in. So number 2, we've got, I think we're about 50 minutes into that one. And we're enjoying that one. And then number 3, if I remember correctly, is where I think they go to Japan or China or somewhere. And I think they might meet other turtles from memory. But I used to love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That is my random film of the week, Andy. And I think that's very random.
That is quite random. And do you want to know a tenuous link to an earlier mention in the podcast?
Yes.
So I mentioned the band The Builders, based on my listening to the Kevin Nash podcast. Kevin Nash, you may know him as Diesel. Don't know if you remember the wrestler Diesel back in the mid-90s.
Yep.
He is one and the same. He played Super Shredder in...
Really?
Is it the second or the third? The second one. So he is Super Shredder in the second Turtles film from 1991, I think it was.
So we haven't got to that point yet. So Shredder has done the ooze on the other two animals, so they're like fully grown now. But he hasn't been injected with the ooze yet, so I haven't seen that yet. Well, I've seen it when I was a kid. So when that first one came out, I would have been 9 years old, 10. And I would have watched it a few times as a kid as well. And I used to have them on DVD. Not DVD, I used to have them on VHS. That's how old it was. I used to love those films. I used to have all the little action figures as well. The good old days.
The Rain Room.
Shall we start the pod proper now? Yeah, we've had some fun. It's been good to talk about various things that we don't usually get to talk about on the podcast. But one of the main topics is sequels. So we thought for our first monthly special, the Rating Room Extra, we've given you a load of extra, and now we're going to give you the main topic. So sequels. And I got the idea to talk about sequels from you recently going to the cinema to watch Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Did you mention that on a previous episode?
I can't remember if we discussed it on an episode or we talked about it off air. But that is the one that you stood me up on, wasn't it, Andy?
It was, yeah. I profusely apologise. Here is my public apology for my my poor planning and lack of foresight.
No, it's... Yes, you missed a good one there, Andy, because I would have never seen that at the cinema before. I would have only ever seen it on TV, VHS or DVD. And I think it's a good starting point, really, isn't it? Talking about sequels and talking about T2.
It's a good starting point, yeah, definitely. And I thought we could expand on that and talk about various sequels that we either like or don't like. Shall we start with some of our favourites? I'll give you some of mine that just come to the mind off the top of my head. So I've mentioned I'm a big fan of the Batman films, and I guess they are a franchise, but so you've got multiple sequels, but the one sequel that really stands out above all others is The Dark Knight. I mean, Batman Begins was a fantastic film, but The Dark Knight, tremendous, really, really good sequel. The American Pie series, original film, very, very good. Number 2, good but not as good, but then they really ramped things up with American Pie The Wedding and American Pie The Reunion, which I thought were both excellent. Now, our American listeners, I think they were just called American Wedding and American Reunion. They missed out the pie part for those films, but they were released in the UK as American Pie The Wedding and American Pie The Reunion, I believe. And then I want to hark back to season 2. We talked about Toy Story, first of 4, potentially 5. But for me, the best one's got to be number 3. That was a very good sequel. What about you? What are some of your favourite sequels?
So I agree with you, Andy. The Dark Knight is one of the best sequels. And another film that I watched in the cinema not too long ago. I do like Mad Max Fury Road. I do think the Mad Max films are very good. The Godfather Part 2 is a classic. I'm planning to rewatch them actually, Andy, because I think they're actually on Paramount Plus when I'm flicking through the Godfathers. Terminator 2, we've just mentioned. Judgment Day. Aliens. So I don't like horror films, but Aliens is my favourite because it's more of an action film compared to the first one, which is more of a horror film. And sequels, I would say Lord of the Rings. The Two Towers is my favourite Lord of the Rings. As I mentioned on TikTok when someone posted something this week actually about Lord of the Rings, and I said The Two Towers is my favourite.
I would probably agree, actually. I really, really like the Lord of the Rings films. I tried to get my wife to watch them with me. She watched some of the first one. I think she fell asleep. And yeah, she didn't speak to me for a while after that because I'd wasted 3 hours of her life. But I think they're fantastic. And Two Towers, yeah, it's probably the best one. I think they're all good. I'm not sure I could watch them all in a row without a break. And I know some people do that, and they do like the marathons at the cinema, don't they? But that might be a bit much.
Do you think the Dark Knight, is that your favourite Batman film, regardless of the different franchise, entries? You know how they got, like, Nolan did the 3. Out of all the different Batman films that they made, including the ones when we would have been a lot younger, is Dark Knight your favourite?
I'd say it possibly is. Although I was very pleasantly surprised by The Batman with Robert Pattinson. Because I remember when they announced Robert Pattinson as the Batman, and my heart sank. I'm like, no, this is just not going to work. But he is fantastic in that. So I was very pleasantly surprised. That's a good one. And I guess linked to that, Joker, phenomenal film. Really looking forward to Joker 2 when that's out in about a year's time, is it? It's quite a way away. But,
it is quite a way. Lady Gaga is in that one, isn't she?
Yes, she is indeed. Should be a lot of fun, that one.
I've not seen the Joker.
I highly recommend it. It's very, very good.
So I liked the Batman, and I actually purchased it on Blu-ray, Andy, because I didn't want to wait. Cause I didn't get to watch it at cinema, and I didn't want to wait for it to hit a streaming thing, so I purchased it. Now, my wife lasted, I don't know, because it's a long film, isn't it?
It is, what,
Very long.
2 hours 45, something like that.
Yeah, I don't recall, but I remember it being very long, and I remember my wife. So I think she started watching the first 20 minutes, and she said, "Oh, I can't watch this, I don't like it." So she went out, and then she came back like 2 hours later, and she was like, "Is it still on?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a long film." So she just like, but it's good because it's different to the others, isn't it? It's more of a detective version of the Batman, and I don't know if you would have to compare them, but it felt like there was more screen time of him out of the Batsuit from memory as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of focus on Bruce Wayne, wasn't there, as well? And yeah, and as strange as this may sound, it almost felt more realistic.
Yes, yeah.
And they did it with Bale to an extent in terms of Batman Begins and then that trilogy, but this, yeah, there was a grittiness, a realism to it that I thought was really, really good.
Yeah, and Colin Farrell was the Penguin, and you couldn't even tell it's Colin Farrell because my wife was like, because she suffers from this blimmin' face blindness. And she goes, "That's not Colin Farrell." I'm going, "It is Colin Farrell." I said, "He's wearing so much makeup, it's just, you can't tell, prosthetics and everything."
Shocking.
And it is him.
Such a good job.
Yeah. I think he's getting a spin-off as well. I'm sure I read somewhere.
May well be, yeah.
But yeah, so they are the favourites that came to my mind, Andy. Do you have any particular ones that are disappointing? You've talked about your favourites. Flipping it the other way around.
It was difficult to pinpoint down a list. I'm sure there are loads, and there are probably loads where, you think, oh, that was good, but it's not quite as good as the first one or whatever. And, Toy Story 2 I mentioned. It's not a bad film. It's not disappointing. It's still very good. It's just not quite as good as the first one. So there's probably a lot that aren't as good, but you wouldn't necessarily disappointing. But 2 immediately come to mind. The Jungle Book 2. Yes, there is a Jungle Book 2 for those out there who weren't aware. I went to the cinema to see this. Not out of choice. I was babysitting, and the children, I won't name them because not fair, but we took them to the cinema. It's a nice thing to do for the kids, watch a kids film. It was about an hour, which is quite short for a film, I would say. And I don't remember the story, if there was anything like a story, but I do remember that Mowgli was voiced by Haley Joel Osment. So you're thinking, oh, that's pretty big name actor. He's very famous. This could be good. And my lasting memory of it is, it's an hour long, so it's like, well, is that it? And they sang the bare necessities over and over and over again. It's like, we've had this song already. It's from the first film. Yes, you can call back to it, I get that, but when you're singing it maybe 3 or 4 times during the course of the film, it's like, come on, like, what's going on here? So I was massively disappointed with that, because I quite like Disney. Me and my wife are big Disney fans, her especially. So that was a disappointing one. But the other one comes to mind, and this is a bit of a strange one, and there's a backstory. So do you remember the Blair Witch Project?
I do, but I've never watched it.
It's I remember going to the cinema as a teenager to see that with my then girlfriend and my friend and his then girlfriend. So, it was a good teenagers date night sort of thing, and it was a bit of a freaky film, and it was really cool concepts, shot on the camcorders, and then there was all that mystery, is this real footage or is this fake? So it's kind of like added to the bill. It was very, very well done, I thought. And then a couple of years later, and again, listeners may not be aware of this because I don't think it did very well at all, there was a sequel called The Book of Shadows, Blair Witch, The Book of Shadows. Now, the premise of the film, as I recall, was that it was about the Blair Witch Project, i.e. the people in the film, in this fictional setting, were looking for the real-life Blair Witch Project, as it were. So it was a film about the film. It wasn't like following on from the events, if you get what I mean. Interesting premise. Film itself was terrible. But my lasting memory, and this is what made it really disappointing, is I went to the cinema to see it. This was a cinema down in London. Went with my then girlfriend. My sister was there and a friend. So we bought the tickets. We went to the thing. They said, go to screen such and such. Go into the door. There's a film playing, and I heard they f***ed with the tapes, and then it pretty much went to credits after that, because they'd sent us in too early, and they'd ruined the end of the film for us before we'd seen it. So then we had to sit through the film knowing what the ending was going to be, and the film wasn't very good as well, so it was a double disappointment in that regard.
I've never... Yeah, because I don't like... I've mentioned it before, Andy. I don't like horror films, so it's one that I've never watched, the original and the sequel. Did they only make 2, or do you know they made more?
I've got a feeling they made some other, like straight to DVD or VHS, as it may have been back there. So Blair Witch Book of Shadows was film 2. I'm just doing some live Wikipedia here. Apparently it made $47 million. Are you kidding me? Absolute dog shit. But the first one made $248 million, so there's definitely a drop off there. But where 2 sequels, Book of Shadows, and a third one called Blair Witch, which was from 2016. Didn't realise that. Stars a list of names that I've never heard of. I don't think I'll be watching it. That had a budget of $5 million and made $45 million.
Nice.
What on earth is going on here?
I think in the release at Halloween, Andy, people just go and watch them, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they released this in September of 2016, apparently. I thought there was another one earlier than that. I could be wrong. I want to see what's going on here. But yeah, Book of Shadows was 2000. Just awful. Really, really was. I thought there may have been another one, but I guess I was wrong. But no, there were 3.
Andy, you've given us your 2. Now, like you kind of alluded to, there are so many sequels out there that are nowhere near the quality of the original. Now, I've thought about this, and these are some of the ones that came to kind of top of my mind when I was thinking about it. So, Jaws: The Revenge, and I watched Jaws recently again, so that's kind of on my mind. Batman and Robin, which kind of links into, where we're talking about The Dark Knight, Batman. Speed 2, Cruise Control, because I really enjoyed Speed, and I used to have that on VHS, DVD. I think that's a classic film, and number 2 is just shockingly bad. Now, I remember us talking about this. Highlander in one of our other episodes, and I can't remember we were talking about it when we did the Sean Connery special. Now, the Highlander, I think the original is just top class, proper 80s feel. But the sequels, I've seen definitely the next two, and if they did a fourth one, maybe that one. But they're just the drop off in quality there. My wife will argue because I tried to get her to watch the original Highlander, and she could not last long watching it. She just didn't like it all. I just think it's a classic, the 80s Highlander film. Now, the next Karate Kid is another one. I watched The Karate Kid earlier this week. The one with, is it Jaden Smith, Will Smith's kid?
Yeah, that was essentially a remake, wasn't it, as opposed to a sequel?
Yeah. So that was kind of like fresh in my mind. So this is the one with Hilary Swank. So, you know, the follow-on to the ones from the 80s, the original one. So that is a big drop-off as well. And we mentioned Terminator 2. Now, I like the Terminator films, and I've seen them all. However, thinking about the weakest ones, I would have said is Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Now, I think you could argue your case that some of the other films are not necessarily that great, but I find them enjoyable. But in terms of the biggest drop in quality, going from T2 to Terminator 3 is massive.
Yeah, and if memory serves, didn't it get only like a 12 rating or something? So it kind of almost became a bit child-friendly, which is not the point of Terminator at all.
Yeah, I don't know the age ratings, but yeah, it was. In terms of reducing the age rating, because the first one, I remember watching that when I was at primary school, so I would have been 10 or 11 watching that first one, and there's some scenes in there that is quite scary for a kid that's not even a teenager yet. The number 2 is a classic, and then number 3, they are family friendly. You know, that is a family friendly. So 12, I wonder if that would be like a 12A nowadays then.
It may have been. I'm just having a look at the release. I can't find anything about it, but I think you might be right. I think it might have been a 12 rating. My lasting memory of it is, obviously they do the redo of the closed boot motorcycle scene, but with the female Terminator. So that's an attempt to try and put a bit of sex appeal in there. So that's fair enough. But then when Arnie puts on the glasses, and they're like, is it like Elton John style glasses? Are they with the stars? And you think, oh god, it just then descends into parody. Yeah.
It's not the greatest. And I think I wanted to give that a mention, Andy, because we've talked about Terminator 2, and I was just thinking in terms of the sequels, that is just the one that just massively drops in terms of quality. That's the one that springs to mind.
So there's some of our favourites and least favourites, but what do you think makes a good sequel?
I think the main ones, Andy, is it's got to either continue the story or involve the story. So what I mean there, Andy, is it's got to add something. It can't just go through rehashing the same things that you did in the first film. Now, another point is, talking about developing, it's also about the characters as well. So I don't personally like if you just, although, you know, you could say American Pie. When you think about American Pie, you have your core set of characters in each of the films, but they do develop. So I'm thinking of Stifler, for example. His character develops across the 4 films that he was in. And I think that is interesting because you're seeing that development of that character. And those sequels gives that opportunity to either introduce new characters or develop the assisting characters. And that's the one that kind of springs to mind, because Stifler at the beginning, you just think he's a bit of a dick, don't you? And he's a bit of a jock. But at the end, I think he's a funny character. But at the end, he's involved, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's older and wiser while still being a bit of a dick.
He is funny. He is funny. But it's interesting to see the development of the characters throughout the films as well. Consistency as well. So an example here is if the first film was a comedy, then I would expect the sequel to be a comedy. So an example here is Pitch Black. So in America, that was an R rating, and in the UK it was a 15. Now, Pitch Black is a film that I really like. I had it on DVD. I might even have it on DVD still. Really good film, and it was kind of a thriller/horror film. However, when I made Chronicles of Riddick, it was a PG-13 in America, and that was more of an action film. And it was very different. I didn't like Chronicles of Riddick. Then I made another one called Riddick, which isn't as bad as Chronicles of Riddick, but nowhere near as good as Pitch Black. And another one, Andy, is, I know you don't watch superhero films or you don't like them, is the second Thor film, The Dark World, and Thor Ragnarok, which is very different in tone. Ragnarok is more funny, and it is lots of comedy in there. But that's probably the strongest one out of the four films. So I don't know if you have any,
consistency. Yeah, we obviously mentioned it between T2 and T3, well, that's some good examples of consistency. I can't think of any other examples that come to mind where it kind of changes, but you do see changes for like remakes. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. I mean, obviously we've talked about James Bond and the reboot with Daniel Craig, and that brought a grittier element to it. But I guess you could use James Bond as an example. I guess the difference between a Connery as Bond and a Roger Moore, who was more comedic and bordering on slapstick at times, and then Dalton brought something different to it, and then brought so you could argue a lack of consistency there to an extent. Although the premise of the films remained largely the same, so they get away with it. But yeah, you're right. When it's change for the sake of change, or they go too far in the opposite direction, it does kind of ruin it a little bit, doesn't it?
It does, and I suppose my kind of closing point, Andy, is whenever you go to the cinema or you see a new release on Sky or Netflix or Prime, Disney, Paramount, etc., etc. There seems to be sequels or franchises, and it just feels like a blatant cash grab. If one film does really well, it's like, oh no, let's span that out and do some more sequel. Let's do some sequels, and it kind of dilutes the impact of the original. And for me, it's like, why do you need that second, third film? Sometimes films are just great as a standalone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and there's some examples that come to mind for me. Do you like the Fast and Furious franchise at all?
I don't. My wife and my teenage son have seen them all. I like the first one.
So I've seen the first one, and it's one of the worst pieces of shit I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely awful film. So I'm not going to watch anymore. But everyone said, "Oh no, you need to watch it from 4 or 5 onwards." I was like, "Well, why? Why am I going to bring that in?" But obviously, it was successful because people have bad taste. But now it just seems like, from the outside, having not watched them, they're up to, is it 10? Is it 10 now?
Yes.
How many more films can you make about people driving a car?
I haven't watched them since. I remember I watched them up to when The Rock was introduced. And then I stopped watching them, not because of him, just because they're so silly. But I remember my wife, and I don't know if it's the last one or the one before, where they've gone into space as well. And it's
the Moonraker of the franchise, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, they're just silly. They're just very silly. But the first one I thought was okay, because there might be films that have been like that before, but that's the one that kind of jumps out. It's quite original. There might be things out there that probably done something similar, but I'm trying to think, that must be excluding Saving Private Ryan, must be the first film that I think of in terms of thinking of Vin Diesel, and Pitch Black actually, as well. That is the film that.
Yeah, Vin Diesel's not the worst thing about that film. But you can't speak ill of the dead, can you? So I won't mention how terrible an actor Paul Walker was. Might have to edit that. And apologies to Paul Walker's family if you're listening, but he wasn't very good. He just was not a good actor at all in that film. I'm sorry. He was awful. It ruined it for me. I feel the same about Harry Potter. Now, at least Harry Potter, all the films are based on the books, so I get there's a reason for all of those. And a lot of people enjoy the books, I'm sure a lot of people enjoy the films. But Daniel Radcliffe is a terrible actor who did Harry Potter no justice at all, and he was the worst part about that film.
I think he does develop throughout the films. So I do think he's not necessarily the greatest actor. But have you seen him in many things outside of Harry Potter?
The only thing I can remember him in is Extras with Ricky Gervais, and to be fair, he was pretty good, pretty funny in that. But as a young Harry Potter, he just no, it didn't do it for me at the time.
Yeah, I would say he's one of the weakest ones. But I haven't seen him in many things. But one of the things I have noticed is he takes varied roles, which I think is very good. There's no chance of him being typecast because of the range of roles that he's taken.
It's good. I'm sure as he's got older, he's got better. I've not seen much of that though, but I'm sure it has. Just it wasn't good.
You know, when we talk about Harry Potter, Andy, the thing that always jumps to mind is the comedian. You know, Whitehall. How he said he went to like casting for it, but he lost out to Daniel Radcliffe.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, what's his first name?
Jack Whitehall.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. He went for like auditions and stuff, but he missed out.
I could see that. I've seen Jack Whitehall live many years ago. He's a very funny guy.
Yeah, I like him. I used to like him in. He's done some TV shows, hasn't he? I'm trying to think which one. The one where he's a teacher.
Oh, Bad Education.
Yeah, I watched those. And then he was in one called Fresh Meat, I think, when he was like a uni student. A posh uni student. That was quite good as well. But I do like Jack White. I've never seen him live. I've seen a few of his stand-ups and, you know, the panel shows that he does.
Yeah, I saw him many years ago. He was kind of just really starting out. It was quite a small gig in Nottingham. Probably only like 100 people there or something, but very good. Let's move on a little bit. So, what films would you say deserve a sequel that haven't had any? I've got a couple that come to mind. Do you want me to share mine first, or do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
So, probably my two favourite films of all time. One we've spoken about in a previous episode, and one I think I've mentioned as my favourite film. And those two films are Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump. Now, Forrest Gump, obviously, there was talk of the, was it Gump & Co.? The second film? Or, been in pre-production forever, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So it would have been interesting to see what came next. Although as a standalone film, it does work quite nicely, doesn't it? Forrest Gump. It's a nice ending. But it'd have been good to see what they did with that. But Pulp Fiction is the coolest film there's ever been. And I know Tarantino's not really in the habit of making sequels as such, but if he was going to make a sequel, I'd love him to make a sequel of Pulp Fiction. Particularly to see what happened with the Bruce Willis character and whether he has any more interaction with the Gimp.
Pulp Fiction is a film that I've seen a few times, less than 10, maybe less than 5, but I haven't watched it for years. I just love it. It's just so cool. Was that your favourite Tarantino film, do you reckon?
Oh, it's my favourite film, full stop.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's just, I just love it. And I think in a future episode, we should probably cover that in a bit more detail. My wife actually suggested that, talking about the podcast and what we've got coming up in the next few weeks and months, and she's like, oh, so you're not doing the seasons anymore in like Bond or Hanks or anything. I said, no, we're doing things a little bit differently as we go forward, just to experiment. She said, oh, you should definitely do all the Tarantino films. I was like, yeah, we'll take it under advisement. But, certainly an option, I would say.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah.
What about you, Joe? What films need a sequel or you'd like to see more of?
Yeah, I think this is difficult, Andy, because like kind of we've alluded to earlier, sometimes a film is good as a standalone film and it should remain untouched. But I wanted to give you an answer to this question, so I have thought about it and I've come to 4 films. Now, one of them is a bit of a random film, but it's one I've watched recently, is Old School, the classic film there. So, Andy, I don't know if American Pie kind of spawned this kind of genre of films, but Old School, I'm sure, came out after the American Pies. Do you know that kind of genre of films that you seem to have quite a few?
Early 2000s, this would have been. I think American Pie was 99. But yeah, I know what you mean in terms of this kind of film. Really, it was. Would you say it kickstarted Ferrell and Co? Or were they already
could do.
famous by that point?
Yeah, it could do, because you've got like the other films as well that I'm thinking that like Road Trip as well. But Old School, because I watched that recently and I just want to see what Frank the Tank is up to, because if you've not seen it for a while, Andy, it ends with the main characters doing their thing, and then it kind of closes with Frank the Tank in the supermarket, and he bumps into what's the main character's name? I'm thinking Mike for some reason. The woman that he was dating at the beginning. Do you remember? She was having like a gangbang, and he bumps into her in the supermarket. And I'm intrigued to see what happens to Frank the Tank. Did you do some live research?
I'm just having a look. Yeah. So, who was he dating? Was it Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah.
Juliette Lewis.
Oh no, Juliette Lewis. That was Heidi.
Yeah, Juliette Lewis. Yeah, yes, yeah. So another one, Andy, is, and I don't know if it's ever been kind of looked at, is The Goonies. So The Goonies is obviously a classic. I loved the film as a kid. I've not watched it for a few years, and it's one that I'm trying to get my kids to watch, but they never seem to be interested in terms of watching it. But I would love to see what the gang are up to now as well. So I think that would be kind of cool. Now, this one I'm torn on. It's Inception, and that's one of my favourite films, that is. And I'm really torn because of the ending. So have you seen Inception?
I have, yes. Very, very good film.
So the ending is ambiguous. So it leaves it up to the viewer to decide whether he's still in the dream world or he got it out. He got out and made it back to see his kids. And I would just love to see a sequel to that. Kind of get back into the dream world and see everything that Christopher Nolan could do with Inception 2. But if they didn't do it, then I'd be fine, because I do think it's a masterpiece already. Now, the last one, Andy, is Serenity. And I think that's a brilliant film, another brilliant film. And myself and my wife, so before we were married, we actually watched this before realising this was a follow-up to a cancelled TV programme called Firefly. And after we watched this, Serenity, we thought, that film was so good. And we ended up buying the box set for Firefly. So Firefly only lasted one season, it got cancelled. And the film is so good. So I don't know, have you seen all those films, and what's your thoughts on those?
So I've seen 3 of the 4. I've not seen Serenity or the Firefly TV show. Goonies, I think, is the one that stands out as almost a must. But it's almost 40 years old now, that film. And I know it's been rumoured on and off a lot, hasn't it, that they're going to get the gang back together, but becoming less and less likely as time progresses. But certainly would have been intriguing if they'd have made one maybe like late 90s, early 2000s, so sort of 15, 20 years later.
Yeah, Yeah, because when those kids are kind of going off to say uni or college, whatever, the Americans do in terms of the age, it'd be kind of cool to see what happens there. But yeah, it would. It has been left too long, so I don't. The only way I think around it is if they remade it and then did a sequel, because I think they struggled to do it with, because the old lady has passed away, but I don't know in terms of the main actors, in terms of the Goonies.
I think there's been 1 or 2 deaths, hasn't there, in the cast. I guess they could always do it like, one of their kids or grandkids.
Yeah,
or, 2 of their grandkids are friends or something. There's always that tenuous thing.
That's a good shout, Andy. Is there any instances where you think a sequel's been better than the original film?
Yeah, I think a few that I've already mentioned, actually, like Terminator 2, I think is better than the original. Original's very good, but Terminator 2 is the one that I really remember. And obviously I mentioned the American Pie, Wedding and Reunion, I think are slightly better than the first one. I think Toy Story 3 is my favourite of the franchise there as well. So again, that's another example. And we mentioned The Dark Knight as well. So I don't think I've got anything new to add to that. What I'm really struggling to think of is where the first film was terrible but the second film was brilliant. I guess maybe some of the Fast and Furious might fall into that category. It's just I watched the first one and hated it so much I vowed never to watch another one. So I could be missing out.
I don't think you are, to be honest, mate, because I think that is the best one.
Okay.
I think I need to IMDb it and see what the rankings are.
I'll leave them on the shelf then. What about you? What would you say is a better than original?
I agree, in terms of some of the ones that you mentioned, The Dark Knight, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. I obviously mentioned earlier Ragnarok, that is the best 4 film. Aliens, I mentioned that as well. I mentioned the 2 Towers, Lord of the Rings. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, is better than the first Mad Max. I've seen all the Mad Max films and I do like those. And another Marvel one is Captain America, The Winter Soldier. I think is the best one, and where the sequel is better than the original film. So they're the ones that kind of come to mind, Andy.
Good stuff. So that kind of brings us to the end of our sequels portion of the episode. Now this episode is obviously sequels and serial killers. So we're going to get on to the serial killers part of the episode in a moment, and that's going to be a little bit more what you're used to hearing, because we're going to bring back some of our ratings and rankings for the main event of the show. But before we get to that, just thought I'd give you a bit of an update of what's coming up over the coming weeks. So it is that time of year. We're approaching the holidays, Christmas. So we thought over the next few weeks we'd give you Christmassy treats and give you some Christmas films to digest. So next week we're going to be talking about the Will Ferrell classic Elf, one of my favourite Christmas films, I have to say, spoiler alert. We're also going to be talking Die Hard. I guess the question on everyone's mind will be, is that a Christmas film or not? We'll probably debate that, I'm sure, over the course of that episode. And then Home Alone as well. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into Home Alone, which, again, another classic staple of the holiday season. And then our next monthly special, so the next episode of the Rating Room Extra, will be focused on Christmas films. Or maybe Christmas TV, Christmas music, all things Christmassy, just in time for Santa to come down your chimney.
So, Andy, I have watched, so as you said, this is early November, and I've already watched 2 Christmas films that are not on our list.
Wow. I'm
getting into the festive spirit.
I have usually wait till December. And I guess I was born in November. I've just recently celebrated a birthday, so I have to get my birthday out of the way before I can start thinking about Jesus Christ's birthday. He's a little bit older than I am.
But as Andy has mentioned, we are going to be talking about Christmas over the next few weeks. So we want to get everyone into the festive spirit. So we do love to hear from you all. So we would love to hear what your favourite all-time Christmas films are. So maybe there are films out there that we're not aware of. because I do like watching a lot of Christmas films, Andy. So not always the mainstream ones, the ones that kind of go straight to TV. I do like watching them as well. So if there's any kind of hidden classics that you want to let us know, you can drop us a message, email, comment on our social media account. Your recommendations might make it into our next holiday special. So we've got this one locked down, but you never know. In our Xmas monthly special, we might be able to, pull some comments or suggestions from some other people as well. Because Andy, just before I pass over to you, last year I bought my wife the box set of Mrs. Merkel, also known as Mrs. Miracle. Have you seen those Christmas films?
I have not, no.
Yes, so they're good. I think they are straight to TV. Yeah, straight to TV films. But the thing is, though, I got it from Amazon and I didn't realise it was German. But thankfully, even though all the boxes in German, the films are in English. So it was fine. It's just the menus you just have to navigate because it is in German.
Das ist gut, ja.
So I've made that mistake twice. I made that mistake by buying a German box set, and then the other time I made that mistake is when I bought a graphic novel that was in Spanish. So I have to send that back.
I'll not attempt any Spanish at this point. Yes, so that's all to come. And as a little bit of a sneak peek, we've also invited back a previous guest on the Rating Room. So go back to season 1, where we talked all things James Bond, and we had various guests talking about their love of the Bond franchise. And we have guests, and one of which was Toby. So if you remember Toby, he appeared in season 1, but he's been back to talk to us about Tom Hanks to tie off our season 2 episodes. Before we get into the main part of this episode, here's a sneak peek of what you can hear on Toby's interview.
Approaches, and although there have been bad films, I don't think his performances can ever really be put down as being bad. He's made some films that could have been very average better, and then the ones which were great, they are all great. I'm sure he's probably looked back at his own film career and thought, or maybe I shouldn't have done that one, or maybe I shouldn't have done that one. But I guess everyone can have 20/20 hindsight. Where he sits, well, is he the middle ground between Daniel Day-Lewis and Arnold Schwarzenegger? One extreme to the other in terms of their approach to how we see them making films and the types of films that they make. But I wouldn't doubt that he could probably pull off an Arnie film character or a Daniel Day-Lewis film character. He has that range and ability, and because what we see as the public of his persona outside of movies, he generally comes across as being a fairly decent chap. He's not one that you ever see in you would, if you saw him in the tabloids having gone off with some woman somewhere down a back street in Vegas, you would think, really? I'm not sure I believe that. He's got a good guy character off film, and he has that reputation now where I'm sure he can pick and choose what he wants to do, and do what he feels is right for him, because I'm sure he's at a point in his life now where he doesn't need to make films. I'm sure he's got a sufficient dollars in the bank that he could put his feet up and go and live in Hawaii for the rest of his life.
So there's just a taster of the full episode, which will be on our usual channels, Spotify, YouTube, on social media, website, the places. But you can find the full interview with Toby in there. But shall we get into the main event of these monthly specials? And we're going to be doing this over the next few months, is we're going to be talking about serial killers. And what I mean by that is one in particular, and that is Dexter.
Thank you, Andy. So, as we've mentioned, the monthly shows are going to be different to our weekly shows. And the monthly shows, as Andy mentioned, we're going to focus on a different season of Dexter. So we're going to rewatch the show in order, and then we're going to discuss, scrutinize the episodes. We're going to look at the characters and some observations while we've rewatching Dexter for I would say probably the second time, because we've watched it all once before, but I've not watched Dexter since it was first aired years ago. So grab your blood splatter kits, sharpen your knives. We are going into season 1 and exploring the sinister side of TV's most notorious serial killer. So Andy, do you want to just start episode 1?
Indeed. So we're going to go episode by episode for the most part. We may wander here and there, but we're not going to go into great detail about each episode. But there's a few things that I've called out as notes. So Jay, jump in at any point if you want to add to anything or challenge anything. But my note on episode 1 was basically this was setting the scene. This was introducing all the main characters. So who is Dexter? What is he all about? Who are the main characters in the periphery, as it were? And I thought this was a really, really good way of getting to know Dexter and what kind of motivates him. And one of the things that really motivates him, or kind of defines him, is the Code of Harry. Now that's going to be a talking point throughout the entire run, because he is a serial killer, but he has a code. He won't just kill for the sake of killing. There's got to be a reason. And this is where we first see this sort of introduced, isn't it, in terms of how the code is explained.
Yeah, I think it's clever. It's clever how they do this, Andy, because I'm just going to jump to one of my comments, because you talk about the Code of Harry, and there's got to be a reason why Dexter follows that. You know, what is that reason that Harry's kind of passed on this knowledge, this code? And I think, jumping to my comment here, Andy, is I think the writers were really clever about how they introduced Dexter to this, because I think in terms of how he picks his victims as well, he's very meticulous about he has to follow Harry's code that you've just mentioned. And I think the thing that was really clever was, in this episode, we see Dexter kill a paedophile and a rapist / murderer. So straight away, you're getting the audience to side with Dexter and follow the Code of Harry.
Exactly right. He is a good guy. He just happens to kill, which is the normal motive of a bad guy. But I mentioned the introduction of the various characters, which we will talk about. But one of the characters that sticks in my mind, and as soon as he appeared on screen, it just made me smile, and that's Sergeant Dokes. The interaction between Dexter and Dokes throughout the season is just hilarious to me.
I have a different view of Dokes. I do not like Dokes at all. You know, I would have loved to see a prequel to this, because I'm assuming the relationship has always been like that. I know Dokes kind of alludes to it over the next few episodes. He thinks Dexter's weird, isn't he? And I don't think there's anything that kind of made him think that. What is it? Just his general how he behaves, Dexter, in terms of Dokes just takes a dislike straight away. I don't think there was like a trigger point, was there? That's, from that point.
No, I know what you mean. It's not. There's nothing that starts Dokes thinking that way. He just always thinks that way. So from the first interaction, you just know that Dokes does not like Dexter, and he thinks he's weird, and he creeps him out.
Yeah, no. I don't like him. I don't know why you like him, Andy. He's well built, isn't he? Is he an ex-SEAL or Marine? I think it mentions.
I think he's certainly ex-military, isn't he? And he's got that look about him.
Yeah.
But I remember the interaction. I just find it quite amusing. Now I'll let you get into some of the nuances in terms of the story of what's happening in episode 1, but there's just a couple of things that I wanted to call out that I noticed. One was about Lieutenant LaGuerta, Maria. She's very flirty, isn't she, with Dexter? I think she really takes a shine to her, and I don't remember that from first time round. So as you mentioned, this is our first time watching it since it aired originally, so this is going back, what must be 15 years now at least. And I don't remember that flirty nature of Maria towards Dexter, but it was very prevalent from the offset.
Yeah, I didn't recall it was that full on, but it does. Now you're saying that, Andy, I do wonder. Does it ever mention whether she's had any relationships with anyone else? Is Dexter just the one that she's got her eye on, or has she had other kind of relationships? Because I don't recall.
I don't think so at this stage. I think it is alluded to that her and Dokes have worked together in the past. I think that maybe they were partners in the professional sense, as in they were, detectives that worked together. I didn't get the feeling that there was anything romantic there, so I could be off base. But no, she just seems to be quite smitten by Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, so she has a very contrasting opinion of Dexter compared to Dokes then. Flip side of the coin there, both of them, isn't it?
Exactly.
Extremes.
I guess she can't see Dexter for what he really is. But Dexter's obviously not taking the bait because he's already got a girlfriend. We're introduced to Rita in this episode. It's a very, very complicated relationship. So as Dexter is introduced, you get, he's not normal, clearly. But he's got to appear normal. And one of the ways of doing that is having a relationship. Because normal people have boyfriends and girlfriends, I guess. So he's got this girlfriend, Rita. But she's quite troubled as well. So it's a very complicated relationship, to say the least, isn't it?
It is complicated, and Dexter mentions, doesn't he? I don't know if it's this episode or when things are going a bit pear-shaped with Rita. He mentions previous girlfriends, doesn't he? Relationships, and he says like it kind of gets to this point, and then it kind of fizzles out, and then so he's had relationships where he's kind of played this game in terms of that perception of he's normal, air quotes.
I think. I don't know if it's explicitly said if it's this episode or if it's later on, but basically it's when it gets to the point of having sex, that's when his girlfriends realise that he's not quite right. And when that was first sort of said, I'm like, well, how is he a bit of a freak in the bedrooms? Like, why would they think that? Or I guess it's just they see something in him from that point onwards, so he doesn't let it get to that point so that they can't see the real him.
Yeah, no, yeah. I don't think he brings out his clean film or anything like that, or kind of cosplay. But yeah, like you said, Andy, I'm just going to pick out a couple of things. So this happens pretty much at the end, if I'm not mistaken. So Dexter is following a truck that he suspects to be the ice truck killer. So they've got this lead, and a victim's head is thrown at Dexter's front windscreen. So he was on to the real ice truck killer. So that is, I would say a coincidence, but obviously later on in the season we find out who the ice truck killer is. Well, at this point in time, we don't know who he or she is. And it ends with Dexter finding a doll in his fridge that the ice truck killer has left a little present for Dexter. And if it was me, Andy, I'd be quite freaked out about that. But Dexter is quite, I don't want to say smitten, but he's quite happy, isn't he, to have like this playmate?
Yeah, the game is on, isn't it? And I think he realises that maybe there's somebody else out there that's a bit like him, and they know about Dexter, but Dexter is hunting, so it adds another dynamic to things for sure. And I guess which would be worse, finding that doll in your freezer or finding the penguin in your freezer?
I think it's easier to sort out the doll than the penguin. And I was surprised, Andy, that we were introduced in terms of I was surprised that the doll was happened in the first episode. I thought there was a bit more lead up, because I remembered the wind, the head being thrown at the windscreen. I remembered that. But I didn't realise it happened in the first episode. I thought that was a bit later on. But it's straight away, he's killed. So he's got 2 kills in this episode. And then he's had a run-in with the ice truck killer. All in episode 1.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way to start the series, I thought. A really, really good episode.
So, moving on to episode 2, Andy, what's your thoughts on this one?
So the first thing I noted was that introduction. So in episode 1, we didn't get the normal introduction that we're now used to, but the introduction where he's basically doing everyday tasks, isn't he? You know, he's cutting up some bacon, he's making coffee, he's slicing an orange. You know, or when you list the kind of things that happen, it sounds really, really mundane and boring, doesn't it? But the way it's shot, with the music and how everything is somewhat linked to like crime or murder, or you know, it just everything about it is really, really cool. And I think it's arguably one of the best TV introductions of any show ever. But it's episode 2 when we first saw it. I didn't realise we didn't have it for episode 1, so it was good to see that back. Yeah, that was kind of my main takeaway. Now, and a couple of other points that I've put down is, so the ice truck killer is the theme of the series, but within each episode there's certain mini stories, I guess, as they were. And one of the things that happens in this is around a drunk driver who looked very familiar to me, and then I remembered it was Sam from True Blood, which is another excellent TV show as well. But I have to say, I did not take many notes for episode 2 because I was just hooked. I was so engrossed that I forgot that we were recording a podcast and I needed to take notes to talk about it. So I'm going to let you do the heavy lifting on this because I didn't really take any other notes.
Andy, I didn't take money in this episode. I reckon that, the drink driver / killer, I recognised him but couldn't figure out where he was from. He had a familiar face, but I didn't realise he was in True Blood. But True Blood is one of those TV programmes that I watched the first couple seasons and I kind of dipped out. So yeah, I don't know how it ended.
The owner of the bar.
Yes, yeah. When you put down,
is he a shapeshifter?
I believe he is. Yes, from memory. Yeah. But in terms of episode 2, the pertinent points would be the police find the ice truck killer truck that he used. Deb gets I don't know if it's a promotion or just moved into the department. Was it a promotion, Andy? Was it, or she just moved? Because she wanted to get out of Vice, didn't she? But I don't recall if it was an actual promotion.
I don't think it's a promotion as such. I think it's a lateral move, but I guess homicide's where it's at. That's where the rock stars work, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. And Deb is a character that I dislike. I just don't like her at all. Sam from True Blood is Matt Chambers, we find out. Or actually we found out that is his alias that he's using. And from memory, when Dexter's flicking through his research, I think I recall that he tends to use the same name each time. So I think we can be confident that his first name is Matt, but then he changes his surname. And in terms of Dexter kills, it's just the one in this season. But yeah, my notes were quite thin, Andy, on this one.
Yeah, it was just really engrossing, a really, really good episode. Let's move on to episode 3 then. And at this point, my wife made me skip the intro. She's freaked out by it. And I remember this from first time round as well. She didn't like the intro, so we always had to either skip through it or we had to, she had to look away. And what she said this time is, it makes her want to be a vegetarian, which I thought was quite a funny thing.
Yeah, I must admit, Andy, I skipped the intro as well. It is an intro I skip. Some TV programs I will watch all the time, but this is not one of them.
Oh, I think it's just fantastic. So I would prefer to watch it to set the tone. So it's foreplay, is what it is.
Yes. Yeah, we've had an hour of it in this episode, haven't we?
Indeed, yes. We were really teasing you. So this episode focuses on a young kid, and I think you've made some notes about Jeremy about this, but I made some of the notes about just some things that happen along the way. So Rita has her car taken away from her. Now, we're not going to go massively into detail about every character and every storyline and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely one you should watch. So the highlights are she's got an ex-boyfriend who's a loser, basically, and I think he was a junkie. And one of his junkie mates is owed money, so he's come to collect, so he takes the car. And my note was, Dexter, do something. Like, we know who you are. We know you're a serial killer. You make bad people disappear. But it just kind of like lets it happen. I thought that was a bit disappointing.
He was, I think he was struggling with what he should do and what he might want to do. Because doesn't Rita say something? Or I can't remember. It does, because the bloke that comes kind of antagonizes him a little bit as well, but Dexter doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I think that the kid's in the picture as well, so I guess it makes it difficult. But Rita's quite scared. She's a very timid, submissive kind of person. So yeah, they just kind of let it happen. I'll just go over a couple of my other notes, which are not necessarily in any particular order, but just highlights that I picked out. So Masuka, who is a quite amusing character, and as the seasons progress, I think he just gets more and more disgusting in a good way. But he teaches about Butterface and the Bronco, which both made me laugh out loud. Do you want to explain to the listeners what the Bronco is, Jay?
What did your wife think of those little comments?
I think she finds it quite amusing, but she's used to it with me because I'm a bit of a child myself, so she was probably disgusted by it. But no, I think she finds him quite amusing. She also doesn't like Deb. She doesn't find Deb interesting at all. I think she finds her quite annoying. But there was a quote that I found amusing between Dexter and Deb. I can't remember why it came to this, but Deb's upset about something. Dexter says, "Want a hug?" To which Deborah just replies, "Fuck off." I don't know why. I had to note that down because I thought that was quite amusing. And my last note, I believe, of this episode was there was a flashback. So throughout there's flashbacks between Dexter and Harry, really, isn't it? Just to say, kind of, it's almost explaining of how he got to be how he is, and it's a continuation of the code thing and all the things that led to it. But we get a flashback to Dexter's very first kill, and I thought it was a really, really well done scene. But also, he didn't make it easy, did he? He was still refining his technique, shall we say?
Yeah, and we will see, because it must be episodes after this where he does things like hunting, doesn't he, as well. But this is, like you said, his first kill. And the reason why it's a first kill is because we see Harry is in hospital and he's slowly dying. But we actually find out that the nurse is slowly killing Harry as well. And as Andy mentioned, Jeremy is here as well. Dexter does target Jeremy. But at the end of the episode, because you're thinking Dexter's going to kill Jeremy, but at the end of the episode, you find out that Jeremy actually killed his rapist. So Dexter warns Jeremy about killing again, and he lets him live. But this is not the last time we see Jeremy in season 1.
Yeah, I thought was a very risky thing for Dexter to do.
Yes, because he's exposed himself, figuratively.
Yeah, not literally. That was Jeremy's been through enough of that by the sounds of it.
But yes, I was a little bit surprised with that. And we have, I think it's a voiceover. Dexter says something about Harry lived for another year after being released from hospital. So the nurse was. We don't know how many kills a nurse has done, because that must be something she's not done, not the first time, is it, Andy, that she would have done that? Because one of the things I was thinking about is, and I don't want to jump to seasons ahead, Andy, but I don't know if you recall, when we obviously going to track the kills in this season, but I don't think you explicitly find out like the kills before the TV show started. I don't think there's ever a number, is there?
There's not. He's got his little slide box, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Which, is that all the kills?
Yeah, that's what I don't know.
I'm not sure. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. In fact, I'm jumping slightly into season 2, but I think there's something in season 2 where he doesn't kill for a period of time. for reasons which we will explain. But and he's getting a bit tetchy, and it's almost like an addict going cold turkey sort of thing. But I'm sure that period of time is only like a matter of weeks, not a massive long period of time. So for him to have this box of slides, which I don't know, maybe has it got 30, 35, something like that? I don't know. There's never a number said, but it looks like somewhere in the region of about 30, I would estimate. Doesn't seem like a lot if he has the urge to kill on such a regular basis. So I'm not sure what the true number is.
No, I don't. And Andy, do you want to just confirm how many kills Dexter had in episode 3?
Yeah, so I guess technically it's 0 because we don't have any new kills. We do see the flashback with the nurse, but we're not counting that because it's
historic
in the past. Yes, so no new kills in the episode.
So jumping into episode 4, Andy, what kind of comments do you have on this one?
So episode 4, I didn't write the titles down of episodes, by the way, so if anyone's following along at home, it's just whatever the 4th one is called. But I made a little note in terms of what it's about, and it's about the neighbour's dog, as well as everything else that's going on. But my very first note was to do with the ice truck killer. They think they've closed in on him, and they think they've actually found him. But Maria's fucked up. It's Tucci's hand that they find, so he isn't the ice truck killer. And Maria's gone out to the press and said, "This is who we believe the ice truck killer is." There's security guard called Tucci. Now, Mrs. Tucci, his mother, is very forgiving of Maria, who obviously feels terrible about what's happened and goes to apologise. But she's very, very forgiving. Probably too forgiving, I would say.
Definitely, she took that well, because I think, does the chief say something about hope she doesn't sue us? Or I'm sure in America they're quite quick to sue, aren't they, Andy? And I think it was more about damage limitation, but Mrs. Tucci definitely took it better than most people.
Yeah, there's definitely that lawsuit culture, I think. Now, my next note is about the noisy neighbour's dog, or the neighbour's noisy dog, not the dog's noisy neighbour. This was, at this point, my wife threatened to boycott the rest of the show if anything bad happened to the dog. So we could have been onto a non-starter. It's very, very early on in season 1. Now, another one of the characters that's present throughout is Angel Batista. He's in a bit of a funk, isn't he? He's on the surface, he's in a good place. But his life is falling apart in secret. But I really enjoyed throughout the episode, he's talking about he's got an anniversary coming up, and he keeps showing Dexter these gift ideas, and Dexter just keeps all over them. And I just find that quite amusing, because he just couldn't find it in himself to lie and say, "Oh yeah, that's a really nice gift." He was just like, "Yeah, that's crap," or whatever. And it was like it was getting really, really quite upset about it. But I found it amusing.
I like Batista as well. I think he's a good character, and him and Masuka are probably Dexter's best friends in the department.
Yes, I would say so. Whether he considers them friends,
yes,
but they're the closest to appearing like friends. And my last note, and if you've seen the episode and you remember it, you'll understand why I've said this. Rita makes a pretty good Lara Croft.
Definitely. It's a very good scene, that one, Lara Croft. And in terms of the flashback, we've got Harry tells Dexter the importance of faking it to seem normal and to fit in, and that is because the Polaroid of the beach photo as well, and it's set up exactly the same by the ice truck killer. So that is another one that kind of gets Dexter wondering who this ice truck killer is. Lara Croft, Rita's dressed up as Lara Croft because it's Halloween time. It's quite apt because it's just gone past Halloween time when we recorded this episode. And another one about Harry talking about the bullies and blending in again, because we see Dexter at football practice participating in a little bit of bullying, and Harry talks about the importance of kind of just merging in the background because people remember bullies. So he takes that under advisement as well. And my closing statement is, Tucci, much to the relief of Maria, is rescued.
Yes, so they can get back on track with finding the real ice truck killer. But again, in terms of the kill count, technically no new kills in this episode for Dexter, but the series is rolling along quite nicely, and I'm really, really enjoying it. But let's move on to episode 5. Now, the kind of the subplot of this behind the ice truck killer is it's a Cuban immigration type thing, isn't it? That's going on in the background. So there's the kind of the here and now of the episode, as it were. My first note was again related to a flashback, and it's that young Dexter can't read the hints or signals of women, so maybe he is normal after all.
Yes, I like that comment, Andy. It made me chuckle when I saw your notes there, Andy. Yeah, I don't. I think all these episodes, we're obviously at episode 5 so far. I don't think there's been any weak ones.
I agree. I think they've all advanced the story really well. There's all plenty of action and drama and suspense and tension. You get some TV series where they'll have a really good, strong opening episode. They'll have a really good ending, finale, cliffhanger, whatever you want. But then the middle is just kind of filler to get you from A to B, and it loses some of the impact. Walking Dead would be an example for me, particularly in later series. I think, you had really good opening episodes, really good mid-season finales, really good season finale, and then everything else is just kind of like meandering all over the place. This is really advancing things, so every episode is a must-watch up to this point.
And I think that's one of the benefits of shorter seasons, Andy.
Indeed, it's backing up your claim from earlier, so point to you. There's another scene that I thought was very, very cringy, and this is with Dexter and Rita watching a movie. It's just really awkward, isn't it? It's difficult to watch.
It is very cringy, this one. Very, very cringy.
Yeah. Now, a note I made here, and I guess you're going to cover this a little bit later on, is plans change, and we've got 2 for 1. So, Dexter's got to adapt on the fly. And my penultimate note was about the medical care in the US being very different to the NHS. Now, do you remember the scene to which I'm referring to here?
Yes, I do remember the scene with Tucci.
Tucci and, yes, one of
Deb's friends.
Deb's old vice.
Yes.
Informants? Not colleagues, because that's not right. But yeah, you don't get that kind of service on the NHS.
No,
that's for sure.
You don't, no. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
And then my final thought, who is watching him? This is where things start to ramp up. I just wrote, oh, but this is where it's like the tension is really building.
And I didn't remember this little bit, actually, Andy. So this did throw me, because I'm thinking, how does he get out of that? So I was really intrigued to see how the next episode solved that issue. Now, a couple in terms of what's happening in the episode. Tucci's recovering hospital. Dexter's investigating the human traffickers. And Dexter has his prom flashback as well. And we briefly see, I don't know whether I should say this, Andy, because it is a spoiler, but we briefly see the ice truck killer, but we don't know it's him yet. So Andy, my question to you is, did you remember who it was? So when you saw this scene, it was like, I
remembered it from first time round, yeah. So I'm like, oh yeah, here he is, because I couldn't quite remember how he was linked in. At the time of watching it first time round, no idea. But looking back, it's almost obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, it's.
I think, but it's just there's just enough mystery and enough distance that it is a shocking twist when you find out later on that it's him.
Yeah, definitely. And talking of twist, as Andy mentioned, a 2-for-1, we find out the human traffickers is husband and wife as well. So Dexter was following the husband and got the kill room set up for the husband, but it turns out it's the wife is involved as well. And the thing that made me laugh was, just as he's about to do the deed, he's getting some relationship counselling as well from the victims, because even though they're going to die, they're very loved up still.
Indeed, yeah, he's making the most of them while they're still alive, isn't he?
Yes, and my last comment is, in this episode there were 2 Dexter kills, the hubby and wife. And this leads us on to episode 6, Andy. What's your comments here?
Yeah, not a lot of notes taken here. This was another really, really good episode. So Dexter's called to a crime scene, and it's his crime scene. And it's the wife. She's there, but he'd dispose of the body. So this is like, oh, what is going on here? It's getting really, really stressful to watch at this point. And I'll end with one more note, because again, this was one of those episodes that I was just really engrossed in, so I didn't take many notes, but that was a close one. Jesus Christ.
I love that, Andy. And the female tracker, so as Andy mentioned, has been left by the ice truck killer. And if I recall, because time was pressing, he didn't manage to chop up the wife, but just the husband. So the wife is fully limbed, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Andy?
Yet she was very much whole.
So we find out that there was a little boy in the boot trunk that might have seen Dexter, and Dexter's really anxious here, and he's watching the interview, the artist's impression. Rita's ex is also getting out of prison as well. Dexter, I don't know, he is kind of panicking as well, so he dumps his kill weapons, doesn't he? And Deb also then starts to suspect that there's a copycat killer. But if I recall, I think it's this episode, Dexter tries to get her off that scent, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I'm trying to think what he does to kind of throw her.
He verbally, I think he said it, like, did he say very cliched, or, you know, where she's saying like it should be, well, but essentially she's describing what he looks like. I think it's this episode, and she was saying,
oh, is this where she's put the profile together?
Yeah, I think it's this one.
It's linked to yeah. So he's kind of just shoots her down, and she's quite upset by it, isn't she?
Yeah. And then we find out that this sketch artist draws Jesus.
Indeed, hence my earlier witticism of it being a close one. But again, technically, no new kills in this episode. So that's the halfway point of the season. So let's move on to episode 7. Now, episode 7, we are reintroduced to Jeremy, but more on him a little bit later, because also Rita's ex is back on the scene, and this is not going to end well for him. I just have a feeling. He features, I think, for the rest of the season, doesn't he? And quite heavily. So I'll not spend any more time talking about him. But I mentioned Jeremy's back, the kid from episode 3, and I was thinking this is going to be quite interesting. You know, how they're going to weave this back into things. I also made a note that at this point Dexter is disappointed in the ice truck killer. And I also noted that he's taken a lot more chances. Too many. You know, between what happened in the scrapyard and going in to see Jeremy in the interrogation room, he's, and this again is comedy genius, he's cutting it fine.
You like a pun, Andy.
There's, I'll save my last note, which is a quote, until you've gone through your points, because it's kind of the last scene of the episode, so I won't jump ahead.
No. So as Andy mentioned, Rita's ex is back on the scene, and he's called Paul. Deb thinks she's getting closer to the airstruck killer, and they find a dead body under the trailer. And in terms of Andy, I'd just say Dexter's kills was 0 in this episode before you just kind of close this episode up nice and neat.
Yes, it was, and I took note of another quote because I like these funny things, or in this case it was quite telling. So Dexter went in to see the ice truck killer. You know, they've caught him. He's admitted to it. His name's Perry. Perry's his first name or surname, I can't remember, but Perry. So Dexter's really keen to meet him. Of course, he's got to go in there for official police business. I think he's got to take a sample or something, hasn't he? But obviously the ice truck killer's been watching him, so he's going to know who Dexter is, right? So Dexter says hi, to which Perry replies, "Who the f*** are you?" And a big smile comes across Dexter's face because he realizes the real killer's still out there, so the game is still on. But I thought that was a very poignant way of saying, "I'm not who you think I am."
Yes, because obviously, as the audience, we do not know that he is not the airstruck killer until that point. So it's very well done. So we're moving on to episode 8. I'm just going to kick us off. So Dexter has his first flashback to a bloody scene as a kid as well. And I can't remember if he passes out fully or he just kind of like just quickly just collapses and then he's back up again. He's making progress with Rita. Maria finds out that the killer has faked his confession as well, and that's very well done. And we find out the true identity. Oh, sorry. It's not the true identity yet, but we find out who the ice truck killer is. We don't find out the true identity until later on in the season.
No, we know who he is, but we don't really know who he is yet. But the opening scene, or one of the early scenes, Deb's got a new boyfriend, and it's the consultant who, we find out who he is very soon. And I made this note, and I apologise because I'm reading it back. It is quite childish. It's raining, but Deb's getting wet inside the car.
Andy, I need to put you up here because I think this is like the sequel thing. So in season 3, we have gone to an R rating, and our first 2 seasons were very PG or 12A at worst.
Yeah, I've definitely lowered the tone, haven't I? In I guess that's what the extra is. You get that bit extra.
Yes.
Maybe it should be XX extra.
X.
We'll maybe charge for that on some sort of OnlyFans type platform. There was a good scene, flashback scene of Dexter and Harry doing, quote, normal father and son stuff, where Dexter's basically practicing his ambush technique, isn't he? And manages to ambush Harry at the fridge. Nice little scene there. A couple of things that I would want to make note of throughout this episode. So one of the characters in this is the shrink, who Dexter goes to visit. He's sharing far too much with the shrink. Is one note that I made. He's just, certain things he doesn't need to be saying out loud.
He's very confident though, isn't he? And by saying that, he has that self-assurance. Because I was thinking that, and especially when he finds out that he's taping everything, recording everything. I know he gets the tape or the CD or whatever it is, but I don't know if they had cloud backup in those days or not. But he was very, very open about what he was sharing.
Could have very easily been copied or sent out or something. And I don't know the Harry's Code word for word, but I'm pretty sure some of it will be about not getting caught. And that's a surefire way to get caught, is by opening your mouth. But one question I did have is, why does Dexter do so much dodgy stuff on his work laptop?
He does. I know.
Like, IT policies and such, you can't do those sort of things on your work laptop. Like, you just wouldn't. And especially if you're trying to get away with murder several times over, you definitely wouldn't be doing stuff like that. But it seems to be a common thing where he just uses his work laptop for this kind of stuff. And my final note: there's a lot of fucking in this episode. It's, there's no other way to say it. There just is. But we have another kill to add to Dexter's kill count from this episode. The shrink, if memory serves correctly, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Moving on now, we're on to episode 9. We're getting towards the business end now. And Dexter and Dokes just seem to be heading for a showdown. There's a scene where there's basically discrepancies in what Dokes is saying. But as Dexter points out, blood never lies. It's not gonna end well, is it? This.
And this is one of the episodes that I remember, before rewatching it. And this is one that kind of stood out. I couldn't remember why, but I remembered that beginning with the bridge, and running, chasing. I remembered that, but I couldn't remember how the outcome of it and why he did it.
Yeah. One of the more memorable scenes as well for me. I won't read this note verbatim, but I basically said that Paul, aka Rita's ex, is not a very nice man, is he? Not a very nice man at all. Now, Angel turns out to be a bit of a rat at this point, for what we've seen earlier in the episode. So this is not going to end well for Angel either, because you don't rat on one of your colleagues if you're a policeman. And then a couple of other points before I let you fill in the gaps. Harry lied to Dexter, but Deb makes it all about her. And my wife was watching this with me, and she commented that Deb is a whiny bitch. And I have to agree, she is a whiny bitch.
She is, yeah. I just dislike her. Completely dislike her, Andy.
Yeah. And my final point is about Rudy. Rudy is the consultant, aka Deb's boyfriend, aka soon to be revealed as the ice truck killer. He's multi-talented, isn't he? Because not only is he a doctor, but he's also a cable repairman.
He is indeed. So the reason we find out he's a cable repairman is because Dexter finds out that his biological dad has recently died, so they've gone up to empty the contents of the house. And Rudy obviously goes with them as well. And there's no Dexter kills in this episode, Andy. So there's a few episodes where he doesn't have any kills. And moving swiftly on episode 10, Dexter nearly passes out at a crime scene involving lots of blood. And we see that Paul is pressing charges against Rita, so that switching things around here for Rita, poor thing, because she's obviously knocked him out when he tried to come on to her in the bedroom. And Dexter, then this took me by surprise, Andy, because I originally thought this was something he was imagining. But Dexter knocks Paul out with the frying pan and then gives him a heroin shot. And it turns out Paul is sent back to jail for breaking his parole restrictions or obligations.
I completely agree about the it being all in his head. The way it was filmed as well, they're in the kitchen, aren't they? And Paul's just yelling, or he's in Dexter's face, and he's basically just intimidating him, just being a right piece of work. And when Dexter hit him with the frying pan, I was just waiting for that next shot where it goes back to the conversation, and he's just kind of what it's imagining in his head. It's like, no, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done, like you just said. The ice truck killer case is reopened as well. And Batista, I always think of the wrestler, Andy, when we talk about Angel, visits Rudy at the hospital. And then later on, Angel is attacked and stabbed. And then my last comment here, Andy, is Rudy apologizes and tells Deb he loves her. So at least someone likes Deb.
Yeah, but he's we know at this point that he's the ice truck killer, don't we? I'm just going through my paper notes. I think we actually find out in episode 8 that it's Rudy, don't we? I don't think we made mention of that. I think we just skipped over that. Oh, you did write in your notes, we find out the identity. But yeah, it's Rudy. We already knew that. In terms of the podcast, we know. I'm confusing matters, but you get where I'm going at. I don't have much to add to episode 10. The collapsing scene, Dexter collapsing, blood really messes his head up, doesn't it? The stabbing, Angel stabbing, I didn't remember that at all. That really took me by surprise, that did. Like, I can just completely put that out of my head. But again, no new Dexter kills. So, for a serial killer, he's not killing all the time, but, there's still a fair bit of killing going on around, so it's not all bad. So we're now on the penultimate episode, episode 11. Jay, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm just going to give some quick headlines here, Andy. So, because of what's happening with Angel, Rudy ends up meeting up with the hooker with the prosthetics arm, hand, and he kills her, unfortunately, so she never made it. And he chops her up. Batista makes it through his surgery, so things are looking on the up there. Maria gets demoted as well, so that is something that I completely forgot about. And the last one I want to say, Andy, is there's 2 points. Rudy proposes to Deb, but my last comment is Dexter starts to put the pieces together. So what was your observations?
Really, really good episode this was. Random question I have here, but was this the first time we heard reference of Dexter's dark passenger? I think he mentions it in one of his sort of inner monologues.
I think it is, because when you mentioned that, I was thinking, I don't recall that being mentioned. And when Dexter said it, I was thinking, when we watched episode 11, I thought, I'm sure that's not been mentioned before.
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things that I think is synonymous with Dexter. I think it becomes a repeated thing as the series go on. Another quote that had me laughing was from Masuka when they found the body parts under the Christmas tree. And he says, "Ho, ho, ho, another dead ho." Just very, very silly stuff. My last thing I want to call out is about Asta, so one of Rita's kids. She says she misses her dad. Dad obviously back in prison for reasons we've just discussed, but she certainly changed her tune from earlier in the series when she wanted nothing to do with him. But again, we have no new kills, but it's very much high drama right now, isn't it? Because, as you mentioned, Dexter's put the pieces together. Dexter knows who he is. Deb now knows who he is. This is about to go down.
Yeah, it brilliantly teases and sets it up for the last episode. And there's only a couple of things I want to do here, Andy, just to quickly discuss, is because there's so much happening in this episode, and everyone knows now that it's Rudy, so the cops know, and the new lieutenant, who I can't remember what her name is, but she comes in and she takes over the case from Maria as well. And then we get there. I know it seems a bit obvious, but Rudy does that thing where he goes and texts Deb out to sea, activates her phone or does something on the phone just so it can ping, and then later on you see he's actually transporting her in a stolen car as well. And I thought that was interesting. And Dexter then starts to figure out that Rudy, who he is, and has the flashback that reveals Rudy is his real brother. So they're the points that I wanted to pick out, Andy. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss?
It's hard to start talking about this episode without going another 3 hours, because there's just so much going on. But I thought this whole final episode was set up beautifully. There was one bit where Paul tells Rita, Dexter is not who you think he is. And I thought that was really good foreshadowing. Of course, Rita doesn't believe him because she's besotted with Dexter. I have a question, which is, why does Dexter take Rudy, or Brian, to give him his real name, back to his apartment? Because that's an active crime scene. because that's where they found he's got the freezer on it. So I thought that was really, really risky. But I want to leave you with this, and it's the line I've been waiting for, and it's of Dokes, and it's my lasting memory, and I use this in everyday life all the time. When Dokes sneaks up on Dexter and just says, "Surprise, motherfucker."
I forgot about his, that little phrase. That is, but going back to your question, Andy, I agree with you completely. Surely it is an active crime scene. It just seems, I won't say a schoolboy error because he obviously gets away with it. And maybe because he works in the police department, he knows that they've not got any kind of surveillance on there. But it is an active crime scene. It's just so risky. And like you were saying earlier on, in one of the episodes, he's just making more and more, taking more and more risk.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. And there's one more Dexter kill in this episode, of course, and that being Rudy, the ice truck killer, which brings us to an end season 1. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. We didn't want to go too in-depth because there's 12 episodes, obviously a lot to go through, but a very, very good season nonetheless. Now, the rating room is all about the ratings. This is our small screen rank bank, so we're going to have to do what we always do, and that's go through some ratings and rankings. So let's start with the kill count. Obviously it's the first season, so it's obviously going to be top of the list, but in the 12 episodes of season 1 we had 7 kills, 7 new kills, not counting things like flashbacks or things that are alluded to. So that gives us 0.58 kills per episode for season 1.
This season, in the small screen rank bank, we are going to rank the main villains. So we're obviously in season 1, so there's only Ice Truck Killer, so he's number 1 in my list, Andy. Is he number 1 in your list, Andy?
After careful deliberation, I can confirm he is currently number 1 in my list of main villains.
Very good. Would you like to give your rank of the season as a whole first, Andy?
Yeah, so obviously it's ranked top of the list as things stand. This list will evolve over the coming months, but we have to give a rating out of 10. That's what we do here on the rating room, and my rating is a 9 out of 10. An absolutely fantastic way to start our journey back into Dexter. Hooked from the minute I started watching it. Second time around, I loved it the first time round, but second time round, really, really enjoyed it. Even to the point where, as we've mentioned, I didn't take notes, and I'm supposed to be doing it for purposes of the podcast. So just got so engrossed in some of the episodes, I thought it was absolutely tremendous. It's going to be difficult to top, I think. That's because it's a really strong opening season. We know we've got more to come. But 9 out of 10 of absolute classic season. What about you, Jay? What's your overall thoughts and rating on Dexter season 1?
I concur, Andy, actually. I was thinking about this and I thought, I can't give it 10 out of 10. Surely I can't give it 10 out of 10 because I give myself no wiggle room later on. And from memory, I have watched them all before, and from memory, I do think the season 1 is one of the strongest. I gave it 9 out of 10 because, as I mentioned earlier, and you kind of mentioned, there were no filler episodes. And the story kind of takes some twists and turns, and it was really good how they kind of highlighted, exposed who the main villain is, but then they kind of teased it, and then you get that sudden twist at the end in terms of who he actually is, in terms of his relationship with Dexter. So it's a very strong 9 out of 10.
Excellent, thank you, Jay. So I think that brings us to the end of our first episode of the Rating Room Extra. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, so you can send us any questions, suggestions, feedback that you might have via our social media channels, or by reaching out at us at theratingroom@gmail.com.
Go to theratingroom.com for all the information. We've got tons of stuff on our website. We've got a YouTube channel at The Rating Room.
And you can find us on all major social media sites by searching for @The Rating Room. and make sure you subscribe to all our channels to stay up to date with the latest news.
Yeah, so next week we're going to bring a bit of seasonal cheer to proceedings. So don't be a cotton-headed ninny muggins. Smiling's my favourite. That doesn't fit. But next week we're going to be going into the Christmas spirit with Elf, starring Will Ferrell. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.